Chapter 105. Your Majesty, please allow this subject to report. As soon as this person appeared, he didn't even look at the imperial censors. Instead, he directly knelt on the ground and spoke to the emperor. Beloved official, you has presented a memorial. Zhu Qizhen nodded as he looked at this left assistant minister of the Ministry of War Yu Qian, who was rumored to live a very poor life. He wanted to hear what he had to say. This person was precisely Yu Qian. Perhaps it was because of his incorruptibility that the imperial censors had a hard time finding fault with him. Now that he'd taken the initiative to speak up, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. Ignoring the gazes of his colleagues, Yu Qian spoke in a heavy voice. Reporting to your Majesty, this subject was fortunate enough to visit the immortal abode yesterday and witnessed its luxuriousness. At the same time, this subject also received a membership card for the immortal abode. Furthermore, this subject took the initiative to check it out, and found that it was only a card with no silver inside. These words came from Yu Qian's mouth, and with his character, if he said he'd checked it out, then he must have. No one had any objections to this. Seeing that no one refuted him, Yu Qian continued. This subject later found out that with this card, one can enjoy a discount when spending money in the immortal abode. Presumably, this is the only use of this card. As soon as he said this, Imperial Censor Sun Qing immediately chimed in. That's right, this is the use of this card. If someone uses this card to spend money, they can save quite a bit of silver in one go. In the long run, won't the total amount reach tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of silver? This is clearly Yang Qindong. Before Sun Qing could finish speaking, Yu Qian cut in. Your Majesty, this subject believes that this matter cannot be settled like this. This subject has already said that this is only a card, and that it can only be used if one spends money. As for someone like this subject, my monthly salary is barely enough to support my family. Where would I find the money to spend in a place as luxurious as the immortal abode? As such, this card's existence is no different from a piece of scrap paper, completely meaningless. This subject believes that your Majesty can ignore the words of the imperial censors, and encourage the development of the immortal residence. A place like this that can enrich the entertainment of the common people should be encouraged by the country. Only when there are more immortals like this, the country's tax revenue will be more abundant. In the long run, the treasury will be full, which is a good thing for the country and the people. Yu Qian changed his usual self, and took the initiative to speak up for Yang Qindong. At first, everyone was a little puzzled. Could it be that this person also received some benefits from Yang Shima? Otherwise, why would he put in so much effort, not hesitating to directly insult the imperial censors? However, it wasn't until the last few sentences that everyone came to their senses. It seemed like this person's intentions were in vain. He had set his sights on the tax revenue after the immortal abode flourished. Originally, when Ingzong heard Yu Qian's words, he was also suspicious. Could it be that this civil official who called himself Wen Tianxiang really wanted to go with the flow, and clear his name like the other officials? However, when he heard Yu Qian's words, he finally understood. He nodded and said, Beloved Yu's words are reasonable. As the saying goes, only when the country is strong can the people live and work in peace and contentment. Teacher, I'll have to trouble you to investigate the immortal abode's income. Afterwards, the tax rate will be 30-1. During Ren Xian's reign, the Great Ming dynasty was prosperous, and the treasury was full. However, after more than 10 years, Ingzong's hands had already begun to show signs of decline. For this reason, Zhu Qizhen had always been searching for a way to fill the treasury. Thus, the business tax became his goal. After seeing the prosperity of the immortal abode yesterday, Ingzong returned to the palace and immediately came up with the idea of collecting the business tax. For no other reason than the fact that as the emperor of the Great Ming dynasty, he couldn't even replace all the windows in the palace with glass. This made him feel a strong sense of defeat. In fact, Ingzong still had something he didn't say out loud. As the emperor of a country, he actually wasn't as capable as an official who was younger than him. Yang Qindong could cover the immortal abode with glass, but as the emperor of a country he couldn't. Didn't this mean that he wasn't even as good as an official? This was what he found hard to accept. Today, Yu Qian just so happened to mention that he wanted to collect the business tax from the immortal abode. How could Zong be polite? He agreed in person and sent his most trusted teacher, Wang Zhen, to carry out this task. In Zhu Qizhen's heart, Wang Zhen was one of his own. If he was sent to carry out this task, he definitely wouldn't treat him unfairly. Wang Zhen hadn't expected this kind of result. Last night, Wang Wenyi had found him and reported this matter, but he hadn't taken it to heart. Even though he had the power and influence to nip everything in the bud, he hadn't done so. He'd also witnessed the prosperity of the immortal abode, and saw its potential. He was also afraid that Yang Qindong would grow too big, and become a threat to him. That was why he'd wanted to use the imperial censor to warn the sixth young master. Wang Zhen had long thought that this kind of impeachment wouldn't be of much use. It involved all of the third rank and above officials in the capital. Even if he didn't do anything himself, these people alone would be enough to stop the imperial censor's mouth. What he hadn't expected was that Yu Qian would take the initiative to jump out and say that he wanted to collect the business tax from the immortal abode. This caught him completely off guard. Fortunately, this matter still had to go through his hands. This became a bargaining chip in his negotiations with Yang Qindong. After witnessing the prosperity of the immortal abode, Wang Zhen was no longer satisfied with the 10% they'd agreed on. Yu Qian's sudden interruption caused the imperial censor's impeachment to fail. However, it seemed like there was no victor, because the immortal abode had to pay the tax and pay the price. In the end, the court assembly dispersed. The imperial censors left under the warning gazes of the officials. Not long after, Wang Zhen also left the palace, heading straight for the Yang Manor 15 li south of the city. Before leaving, Su Yozhen had already reported the situation of today's morning court assembly to the Bureau of Security. At that moment, Yang Qindong was in his study, looking at the report Tiger's Mane had sent over regarding today's morning court assembly. Because of Yu Qian's appearance, the outcome of what had originally been a muddled case had actually turned against him. He couldn't help but laugh in anger. This Yu Qian isn't fun at all. He's far from being as cute as that smoking, drinking, and perming guy from the future. Young master, what perming? Xiao Yin, who was serving him from the side, inadvertently overheard this and couldn't help but ask curiously. Haha, it's nothing. The young master was just thinking about some things, and was just talking to himself. Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh. Soon after, his expression became calm again. Yu Qian was a capable, talented, and upright official. What was even more rare was that this kind of person cared more about the people and not the king. Otherwise, in history, Zhu Qizhen wouldn't have been captured and he wouldn't have loudly said, "We are completely thinking for the country and not for ourselves." Then Zhu Qiyu, the successor patriarch, wouldn't have ascended to the throne. He wasn't blindly loyal and was talented. If this kind of person came to Qiqian City, he would definitely be of great help to the new army and the new city's development. Yang Qindong liked talent. He knew what he needed to do. But as for Yu Qian, although he liked him, he also knew that now wasn't the time to recruit him. Even if he tried to recruit him, it would never work. If he wanted to be used by him, he could only use force. How would he use force? When would he use force? This was what Yang Qindong needed to consider. Forget it. Since you don't want to be an assistant minister, then I'll fulfill your wish. He smiled. He had already thought of a way to solve Yu Qian's problem, and it would be done once and for all. With a rough idea in mind, Yang Qindong began to consider the issue of taxation. When it came to doing business, paying taxes was a matter of course. However, this was not the case in the Ming dynasty. They didn't collect taxes from officials, eunuchs, or scholars. These three didn't just refer to business taxes, but agricultural taxes as well. This made the rich and powerful even richer. The commoners had to work hard for an entire year, but they couldn't even afford to buy food and clothing. With such a trend, the Ming dynasty's treasury became poorer and poorer. Yang Qindong understood this principle, which was why he used his status to open the immortal abode. Just by avoiding taxes, he could save a lot of money in a year. But he hadn't expected that Zong would suddenly use Yu Qian to make such a move, catching him off guard. He couldn't help but wonder if it was because of his appearance that Zong's thoughts had changed. If that was the case, then it wasn't a good thing. Yang Chendong wasn't a god, so he naturally had no way of knowing what kind of psychological changes Ingzong would experience. However, there was one thing he had to take care of, and that was the issue of the immortal abode's taxes. Since the emperor had brought it up in court, it would be quite troublesome to avoid paying. How to reduce the amount of taxes needed to be considered. Fortunately, this matter had been left to Wang Zhen. If it had been left to Yu Qian, it would have been a real headache. However, even Wang Zhen was someone who ate people without spitting out their bones. He had to carefully consider how to deal with him. Outside the Yang clan manor, Wang Zhen had arrived. He had his own carriage, and there wasn't a single member of the embroidered uniform guard or the Eastern faction guards that didn't recognize him. When the carriage approached, a group of people knelt on the ground. Wang Zhen had long since gotten used to this kind of situation. He didn't even get out of the carriage, and directly drove towards the Yang clan manor's inner courtyard. Right now the potato harvest was about to begin. Anyone who entered the Yang clan manor had to be strictly checked. Only someone of Wang Zhen's status could act so unbridled. The carriage continued forward until it reached the Yang clan manor's courtyard. When they didn't see Yang Chendong's figure, the embroidered uniform guard commander Qian Shi, who was also Wang Zhen's nephew, Wang Lin arrogantly said, "What's wrong? You're just washing a horse. Why are you putting on such airs? Could it be that you don't know how to come out and welcome us?" The two servants, Yang Wu and Yang Lu, who were secretly paying attention to the movements in front of the courtyard, had sullen expressions on their faces. Their fists gradually clenched as they reached for their pistols by their waists. It was only a distance of 20 steps. They were confident that they could take the life of the person who shouted with a hook of their fingers. Chapter 106. Ha ha ha, I didn't know that Eunuch Wang would grace me with his presence. Forgive me for being late. A boisterous laugh rang out as Yang Chendong strode to the entrance of the courtyard. Haha, my young Xianji is too polite. How could this eunuch not feel embarrassed? Wang Zhen, dressed in the robes of a eunuch, stepped out of the carriage and walked over to Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong's smile was the type that hid a knife in his sleeve, but Wang Zhen's smile was also the type that didn't reach his eyes. In the end, the two of them had only come together temporarily for the sake of mutual benefits. They couldn't even be considered allies, so how could they show their sincerity? Yang Chendong bowed and politely said, "Eunuch Wang, please." "Sixth young master, please." Wang Zhen heartily laughed and led the way forward, pulling Yang Chendong 2 steps behind. It was as if he was saying that this was his residence, not the Yang clan manor. Once the host and guest were seated in the main hall, a very ordinary servant brought 2 cups of tea before bowing and retreating. Whenever Yang Chendong's guests came, Xiaoyin would bring them tea, but Wang Zhen didn't even get to enjoy this treatment. From this, one could see that in the eyes of the 6th young master, this person wasn't even worth an ordinary guest. Wang Zhen naturally didn't know about the Yang clan manor. The Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard had countless spies, and many of the important officials of the capital were under surveillance. However, this didn't include Yang Chendong. Not being qualified was one thing, but this place was already surrounded by spies, so there was no need to keep an eye on them. The tea is not bad. It's much better than the last time. Looks like the 6th young master has earned quite a bit of money, Wang Zhen said with a fake smile after dipping his lips into the tea, as if it was for show. Yang Chendong knew that Wang Zhen was reminding him, so he smiled and said, "You're too kind. This is all thanks to Eunuch Wang's good fortune. Of course, Eunuch Wang has a share of the immortal abode's income." AI. Wang Zhen let out a long sigh, as if depressed. He glanced at Yang Chendong out of the corner of his eye, then fell silent. His expression seemed to be saying, "Hurry up and ask me why I'm sighing." How could Yang Chendong not know what Wang Zhen meant when he pretended to be depressed? Since he was going to put on an act, of course he had to go all the way. He immediately went along with the other party's wishes and asked curiously, "Why is Eunuch sighing?" After a moment's silence, Wang Zhen finally spoke. Eunuch Wang, yesterday's Wang Zhen's. You didn't know that there were people. Because you teat yours. 8. Teat know that. T's eunuch. Of such teat, is. Which bastard can't bear to see others doing well, and came up with such a despicable idea? I curse him to die a horrible death. Yang Chendong flew into a rage. His usual gentlemanly demeanor was nowhere to be found. He stood up from his chair and began cursing. She scolded Wang Zhen to the point that he frowned. He thought to himself, where does this look like someone who is well read? This is clearly one of those unreasonable shrews. Wang Zhen listened to Yang Chendong's cursing for a good while. Then, as if he was tired, he sat back down in his chair, panting. Eunuch Wang, tell me who did it. I'll buy his life with silver. His words were spoken in an imposing manner. In reality, Yang Chendong was indeed very rich. He'd earned over 2 million taels of silver from the Immortal Abode's membership cards alone. And that wasn't even counting the people who'd be applying for membership cards soon. There were a few people who'd been waiting to see if the Immortal Abode was as good as they'd been described. After yesterday's events, these people probably wouldn't hesitate any longer. Wouldn't the money still roll in? With money, Yang Chendong's words naturally became much more confident. Now that he'd dared to say that he'd buy his life with money, it made sense. At the very least, it suited his current mood. Seeing Yang Chendong so angry that he'd even go so far as to say that he'd buy his life with money, Wang Zhen couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Youngsters are youngsters after all. They can't keep their cool. One had to understand that these words were already quite a bit of leverage. Even if Wang Zhen used these words to arrest Yang Chendong, the other officials wouldn't be able to say anything. However, Yang Chendong still had a use for him, so he might as well keep his life for now. Since he was a fat sheep, the fatter it was, the more meat he'd get when slaughtered. Ai. Wang Zhen let out another long sigh. His tone was earnest, as if he were an elder lecturing a junior. Sixth young master, you shouldn't be so impulsive. Not everything can be solved with silver. All right, you don't need to worry. This duke has already taken care of the matters in the morning court. Taken care of. Yang Chendong pretended to be extremely shocked. At first he was dumbfounded. Then, as if he'd understood something, he laughed heartily. That's right. How could I have forgotten about father-in-law? With father-in-law's abilities, wouldn't resolving such a small matter be a piece of cake? When Wang Zhen saw that Yang Chendong was about to start flattering him, he was worried that he'd continue to nag for a long time. He hurriedly waved his hands and said, the matter of your impeachment has been resolved. However, the current emperor has also issued an imperial edict that the Immortal Abode must pay taxes. He's even delegated this task to this duke. Sixth young master, what do you think we should do? Yang Chendong, who just calmed down, immediately jumped to his feet when he heard the words taxes. Taxes? Why? The other officials don't have to pay taxes. Even those who haven't yet become officials don't have to pay taxes. This young master is still a fifth-rank official, isn't he? Why should I pay taxes? I'm not paying. Yang Chendong's face was completely that of a scoundrel. When Wang Zhen saw all of this, his evaluation of Yang Chendong in his heart became even lower. Wasn't this person supposed to do great things? How did this Immortal Abode manage to come up with so many tricks? Wang Zhen felt a bit of disdain in his heart, but he didn't let it show on his face. On the contrary, he put on a look of concern for Yang Chendong. This is an imperial edict from His Majesty. Why don't you pay some taxes first? Do I really have to pay them? When he heard the words His Majesty, Yang Chendong seemed to calm down a lot. However, he leaned forward and said in a quiet voice, Father-in-law, you also have shares in the Immortal Abode. If you have to pay taxes, then you'll have to share in father-in-law's profits as well. I only have 10%. It's nothing much. Even if I have to split it, I probably won't get much. Wang Zhen acted as if he didn't care at all. He really didn't seem to care. But Yang Chendong knew that after so many years of monopolizing power, Wang Zhen had long since developed a habit of doing everything he wanted. When it came to splitting his wealth, he probably wouldn't even ask for a single copper coin less. Similarly, once money entered his pocket, he probably wouldn't be willing to part with it if he couldn't take it out. The only reason he said this was because he wanted to fish for more benefits. Knowing the other party's temperament was the same as knowing his trump card. Yang Chendong sighed and said, fine. Since this is His Majesty's wish, then this subject will pay. However, this way, father-in-law's monthly income will be much less. He had originally been immensely pleased with himself, waiting to see what kind of price Yang Qindong would pay to refuse to pay the taxes. However, he didn't expect that Yang Qindong would actually cower and agree. What was the meaning of this? This script was completely different from what he had imagined. At this moment, it was Wang Zhen who was put in a difficult position. If he really had to pay the taxes, he would naturally have to share his benefits. Just as Yang Qindong thought, for a person with such great power, he would always be the one to receive benefits. How could he possibly push the benefits away? No, you can pay the taxes, but you can't give me a share. Of course, I will take a little bit less as a token of appreciation. Wang Zhen's reaction was extremely fast. In just a few breaths of time, he had thought of a countermeasure and expressed his thoughts. Ah! Yang Qindong pretended to be shocked as he looked at Wang Zhen. Soon after he stuttered. Eunuch means that your share won't change? Then how will it be calculated? This tax will definitely be deducted from the general account. No matter, I'll split my share first. The rest will be taxed according to the ratio. Wang Zhen's eyes narrowed as he spoke with a smile, as if he was talking about something insignificant. Yang Qindong cursed Wang Zhen's greed inwardly. He put on a troubled expression and replied, "But if we do that, it will affect the operations of the sky beyond heaven. I won't hide it from father-in-law. Originally, I was planning to use the Immortal Abode's income to purchase goods for the Sky Beyond Heaven Trading Company. You also know that glass and mirrors are all very expensive. Without sufficient funds, it's impossible to do anything. And if we succeed, we'll earn mountains of gold and silver. At that time, I was even prepared to give father-in-law 40% of the profits. Sigh, I'm afraid that once we pay the taxes, we won't have enough funds." He shook his head bitterly as he slammed his palms on the table, as if he really had missed out on something good. Wait a moment. Wang Zhen originally had a cold expression, waiting for Yang Qindong to take the initiative to give him some benefits. However, when he heard that 40% of the profits would be given, his expression immediately changed. He could no longer maintain his previous calm. "Sixth young master, what did you just say? 40%? That's right. 40%. Yang Qindong nodded with an expression that said it was indeed so. Then he added, "Of course, this is under the condition that there is a large amount of available funds. For example, if Eunuch Wang can lend me 2 million taels of silver, in addition to the fact that I don't have to worry about taxes, it is reasonable to take out 40% of the benefits. Unfortunately, since even His Majesty has issued a decree, I'm afraid that it will be very difficult to fulfill." An extremely regretful expression appeared on his face, as if all the beautiful things had vanished into thin air. Chapter 107. No, didn't this Duke say it already? His Majesty left everything in my hands, so this Duke is naturally the one making the decisions. Everything can be discussed. Enough benefits were enough to drive someone crazy. Wang Zhen finally couldn't remain calm under the temptation of 40% of benefits. His expression was no longer as aloof as before. Instead, it was one of deep concern. "I just don't know how much this 40% will bring me in a month. Oh, if we really get 2 million taels of silver, then after a year, the Immortal Abode and Sky Beyond Heaven's monthly profits should be 40% should be around 100,000 taels, right?" Yang Qindong muttered to himself as he counted on his fingers. Then he gave Wang Zhen an extremely accurate number. Wang Zhen's left eye twitched when he heard that he could get 100,000 taels of silver in a month. This number was already more than what he could get from all the other businesses combined. Didn't that mean that as long as he had Yang Qindong's support, he would have an endless supply of money to spend? He could do as many things as he wanted. Of course, Wang Zhen also knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. If he wanted to achieve this, he would have to pay a great price. At the very least, he would have to fork out 2 million taels of silver right now. The question was, did Wang Zhen have it? The answer was obvious. Of course he did. After all these years of plundering and poking around, he had already accumulated quite a bit of savings. Even though he was still a bit short of 2 million taels of silver, with his charisma, he would be able to quickly make up for it. Then should he give it to Yang Qindong? Or should he trust him? Wang Zhen was deep in thought as he considered the feasibility of this step. Yang Qindong looked like he was regretting something with his head lowered, but in reality, he had been watching this arrogant fellow from the corner of his eye. When he saw that he seemed to be thinking about something, he decided to add fuel to the fire. He immediately took the initiative to say, "Eunuch, you don't think that 100,000 taels of silver a month is impossible to achieve, right? Let me tell you, we've only seen the immortal abode. Relying on it won't work. However, once heavens beyond opens for business, the benefits will be unimaginable. This is because the things we sell are not even available in the Ming dynasty. Small items such as soap, toilet paper, diapers, toothbrushes, toothpaste, perfume, various kinds of canned fish, chongsam, and various kinds of women's underwear. Large items such as glass, various kinds of exquisite glass cups, and even the divine mirror in the palace can be bought as long as one is willing to spend money. Think about it. These items are only available to grandmasters. Wouldn't the price be decided by us? I'm afraid that 40% of the monthly profit would be more than 100,000 taels of silver." Wang Zhen had been listening attentively. Most of the things mentioned earlier were things that he had only heard of recently. Once they were circulated in the market, they would undoubtedly be popular goods. When he heard that there was even a godly item for sale, he was completely relieved. He was very optimistic about the future of Sky Beyond Heaven. When Yang Qindong mentioned that 40% of the monthly profit would be more than 100,000 taels of silver, it was Wang Zhen's turn to slap the table and say, "Fine, then 200,000 taels of silver a month it is. This duke can guarantee that no taxes will be collected, and will also inject 2 million taels of silver into Sky Beyond Heaven and the immortal abode. After a year, you will return the 2 million taels of silver to me, and at the same time, give me a monthly profit of 200,000 taels." Wang Zhen's tone was extremely resolute, as if he had made a decision. He was like a gambler. After he finished speaking, his eyes, which were slightly red from excitement, fell on Yang Qindong, as if waiting for his reply. "That's not a problem." Yang Qindong saw that the wolf had fallen into the trap. How could he hesitate in the slightest? Not only did he immediately agree, he even said that he could immediately sign a contract. If he couldn't, then the immortal abode and Sky Beyond Heaven would all belong to Wang Zhen. Seeing Yang Qindong so confident, Wang Zhen was completely relieved. Whether it was the immortal abode or Sky Beyond Heaven, they were both the sixth young master's painstaking efforts. If he dared to bet even that, then he was naturally trustworthy. Ha ha ha, Dong Shuai is indeed a straightforward person. Since that's the case, then you just need to sign the contract and wait for my 2 million taels of silver to enter your account. Wang Zhen was so happy that he even called out Dong Shuai's name. From Yang Shima to the sixth young master to the current Dong Shuai, it was clear that Wang Zhen's impression of Yang Qindong was changing step by step. His impression of him was growing with each passing day. Speaking of which, Wang Zhen was only blindly taking money. Even if something happened to the immortal abode, he would only receive a little less income. It wouldn't hurt him at all. But now, that was no longer the case. If he invested 2 million taels of silver, then he would have to pay a price. Whether it was the immortal abode or Sky Beyond Heaven, they would all become part of his businesses. How could he afford to be careless or sloppy? As for Yang Qindong, Crimson City's development speed was unimaginable. After conquering Flag Mountain in the southwest of Ryukyu Island, there was nothing to worry about. It was only a matter of time before they could fully develop. Add to that the strength of the Navy, and the amount of protection fees they collected every day could be described as 10,000 taels of silver a day. He really didn't lack this 2 million taels of silver, but he still forced Wang Zhen to spend so much money. He just wanted him to face this problem head-on, and put in more effort. Now that Wang Zhen was willing to fork out 2 million taels of silver, it proved that he had invested a lot. He definitely wouldn't allow anything to happen to his businesses. This was what Yang Qindong wanted to see. As for the 200,000 taels of silver a year from now? Haha. Wang Zhen would have to live until then for that to happen. The two of them really hit it off, and the matter was settled just like that. When they drank the tea, it seemed to have become much more fragrant. Seeing that Wang Zhen seemed to be in a good mood, Yang Chendong took the opportunity to raise two questions. The first was about who had caused this morning's incident. If they didn't find the mastermind behind it, there would likely be more of this kind of trouble in the future. They couldn't just passively take a beating, could they? The second question was about Yu Qian. He had proposed that the immortal abode pay taxes. Although this matter had been handed over to Wang Zhen, and there wasn't much of a problem, as long as he lived, he would have to keep an eye on them. Wouldn't that mean that they would have to guard against thieves for 1,000 days? Presumably, everyone would be in a lot of pain. Since he had reached an agreement with Yang Chendong, and had even given him a large sum of money, there were some things that Wang Zhen naturally wouldn't hide from him. He had his own thoughts on these two matters, and told the sixth young master about them. I've already investigated the matter. Sun Qing, Dong Kund, and the other censors impeaching you was Shi Sheng's doing behind the scenes. He was the one who leaked the news to the censors. These people have their responsibilities, so of course they would take action now that they have an excuse. Wang Zhen shook his head lightly as he spoke, a look of resentment on his face. Last time, Shi Sheng had slashed Yang Chendong with a blade. Originally, he should have been punished, and it wouldn't have been excessive even if he had been killed. However, it was precisely because of him that the sixth young master didn't pursue the matter. At that time, he had even promised that the two of them wouldn't interfere with each other's business in the future. But now he had already made a move. Wasn't this the same as slapping him, the middleman, in the face? Yang Chendong's expression changed. He had already investigated the ins and outs of the matter last night, and now he had thrown the question to Wang Zhen in order to hide it. Now he acted as if this was the first time he had heard of such a matter, and said angrily, "This Shi Sheng is really too much of a bully." Yang Chendong's anger was within Wang Zhen's expectations, so he wasn't surprised at all. Instead, he comforted him. "Dong Shuai, this matter isn't just a slap to your face, it is also a slap to this duke's face. Don't worry, I will give you an explanation for this matter. This guild will arrange and persuade Shi Sheng to leave the capital. What do you think?" "Leave the capital?" Yang Chendong pretended to be puzzled as he asked. "Yes, leave the capital. Shi Sheng's position is that of 1,000 households of the embroidered uniform guard, and he will use this as an excuse to monitor the officials outside the capital. As for when he will return, we'll decide based on his performance, all right?" Wang Zhen said with a smile, as if he was negotiating with Wang Zhen. Leaving the capital was naturally to toss out the problem and not cause trouble for the immortal abode and realm beyond heaven. As for when he would return, that would depend on Yang Chendong's performance. If he performed well and the two sides were satisfied with the cooperation, then he naturally wouldn't return to the capital. But if Yang Chendong wanted to play some tricks, then he would just summon him back, and Wang Zhen would just have to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Wang Zhen thought that he had a shrewd plan, but he didn't know that this was exactly what Yang Chendong was thinking. Shi Sheng was a member of the embroidered uniform guard, and he also had a powerful eunuch brother like Shi Ning. Making a move against him in the capital would naturally cause a great deal of trouble, and Yang Chendong would find it difficult to make a move against him. But things were different outside the capital. The heavens were high and the emperor was far away, so it was perfectly normal for something to happen to anyone. "All right, then let's do as eunuch says." Yang Chendong appeared to be in deep thought as he nodded his head in agreement. "And the second problem? How do you want to deal with Yu Qian? This person is a tough nut to crack. I won't hide it from you, Dong Shuai. This duke had wanted to deal with him before, but he was unmoved by force or persuasion. As an official, he is extremely honest. Moreover, there are many people who are willing to speak up for him. This has given this duke quite a headache." As he spoke, he rubbed his forehead. Wang Zhen truly didn't know what to do with Yu Qian. Yang Chendong had naturally heard about how Wang Zhen had captured Yu Qian and imprisoned him, only to be helplessly released later, from the Bureau of Security. He naturally knew that Wang Zhen wasn't trying to shirk responsibility, but that he truly had no other choice. Thus he nodded, then pretended to have suddenly thought of something. "Since Yu Qian can't do anything to him in the capital, why don't we just send him out of the capital like we did with Shi Sheng? Isn't he the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel? Have someone investigate the situation of the various guard stations in the country. This way, what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Chapter 108. Upon hearing Yang Chendong's idea, Wang Zhen's eyes lit up. Not bad, this is a good idea, but he'll still come back in the end. Wang Zhen lightly shook his head when he realized that this wasn't a permanent solution. It's fine. He'll leave one day at a time, and who knows what kind of situation he'll be in when he returns. When that time comes, we'll think of something else. After all, if we make a move against him now, it will implicate too many people and cause too much trouble, Yang Chendong said, appearing to fear Yu Qian very much. These words were precisely what Wang Zhen was worried about. He was also afraid of Yu Qian, or else he would have made a move long ago. Thinking that there was truly no better idea at the moment, and that sending Yu Qian away would be a way to alleviate the situation, Wang Zhen nodded. Okay, let's do as you say. The atmosphere of this second official meeting was much better than the first. When Wang Zhen decided to invest 2 million taels of silver, he had completely stepped onto Yang Chendong's boat. The only difference was that he was the one on the boat, and this was tantamount to placing his life in the other party's hands. It was just that he was completely unaware of it. In the end, Wang Zhen left the Yang clan manor in satisfaction. Not long after, Yu Qian and Xisheng were transferred out of the capital. At the same time, the 2 million taels of silver were sent in batches to the newly opened Heavens Beyond Trading Company. There was already a dazzling array of goods here. There were many goods in Heavens Beyond, and they were constantly being shipped in from Crimson City. But when they were operating, they would always tell the merchants who came to purchase that there was a shortage of goods, so they had no choice but to sell in limited quantities. The purpose of this so-called limited quantity was to trick the eager consumers into buying, or else there would be no more. In other words, there wasn't enough supply, and there would be a mad scramble. In other words, there was a limit to how many goods could be sold each day. For example, glass. Each piece was 6 by 6, and only 1,000 pieces could be sold each day. The price was set by the highest bidder, and the items would be sold to the highest bidder. As for the others, they would have to wait until the next day. There were also glass cups, perfume, toilet paper, and other items. They were limited every day, so there were always a lot of people who needed them. There were very few goods, which made everything a hot commodity. And all of this followed the principle of bidding. The highest bidder wins. There were also divine items like mirrors, which were not only limited in quantity, but would only appear once every 3 days. Because of this, countless merchants fought over them, and there were also many people who tried to establish relations with the Yang family. The terrain here was great, and the coastline was also really smooth, allowing large numbers of ships to be parked there. Furthermore, its location was close to the Little Ryukyu Ocean region, making it difficult for others to suddenly attack. As such, it became a natural harbor base. As the highest-ranking officer of the new army, Gao Xiong had been drooling over this place and wanted to take it for himself. If not for the fact that they lacked manpower, he would have had such thoughts long ago. Now that Deng Maoqi and Fu Zhen had been killed, and the uprising army there was suppressed by the Ming army, Leng Song, who was unable to take advantage of the situation, could only bring his men back to Qiqian City. This allowed the military power in the city to be strengthened. Leng Song's gains from the Fujian trip were huge. The 100 Leng vanguard and 500 support troops that he brought won many battles. In the end, no one died, and only 7 were injured. Moreover, their injuries were not serious. They did not have many casualties, and this was naturally due to the hard work and strictness of their training. After a few months of hard work, the results were also gratifying. They brought back more than 150,000 people from the Great Ming Dynasty, and they obtained countless resources such as gunpowder. With the addition of these Han Chinese, the problem of manpower was alleviated to a certain extent. After another serious and strict examination, Yang, Songdeshang, and the other instructors did not dare to go easy on them. Every support soldier that wanted to officially become a member of the Leng Vanguard had to go through both physical and cultural tests. Only when their results were good, or above, could they become a regular soldier. However, because there were too many people waiting to be selected, the number of people who passed the examination this time was even more than the previous times combined. There were actually more than 600 people who passed the final examination. With so many new Lung vanguard joining at once, Gao Xiong and Lung Song discussed and expanded the army, forming a total of 12 companies, with 100 people in each company. These people were then divided into 4 battalions, with 2 battalions for the Navy and the Army, making 6 companies. With the expansion of the Lung vanguard, Gao Xiong and Lung Song's horizons were broadened, and they set their sights on Deer Harbor. They wanted to deal with the problem of Taichung in one go, and deal a heavy blow to the number 1 Shang dynasty. Now that they had a target, what came next was all sorts of investigations and infiltrations. According to the teachings of the 6th young master, before every battle, the most mature performance was to understand everything about the enemy. If there was enough time, it was best to know who the enemy's commander was. What kind of personality they had, what kind of fighting style they would use, had to be understood clearly. Only then could they achieve the greatest victory with the smallest price. Yang Qindong's words had always been treated as the truth in the new army. The investigations began, and the battle plan to attack Deer Harbor began to take shape. Xisheng left, and so did Yu Qian. In the capital, Yang Qindong seemed to have calmed down a lot after the departure of the two. All he could see were the guests of the immortal abode, and the merchants of the realm beyond heaven. For the time being, Yang Qindong didn't pay too much attention to these things that he had been preparing for a long time. He knew that as long as everything went according to plan, he would definitely earn enough money and gain enough popularity. Since he didn't need to spend too much effort on these things, what came next was to deal with those people who had caused trouble for him. In the study of the 6th young master of the Yang clan manor, there were 3 pieces of paper. These were 3 sets of information sent over by the Bureau of Security. They were information on the left: Assistant Minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel Yu Qian, 1000 Commander Xisheng of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, and Imperial Censor Shen Yu of the Sichuan Dao. What Yang Qindong didn't expect was that not only did Wang Zhen chase Yu Qian and Xisheng out of the capital, he even chased Shen Yu of the Sichuan Dao, who had returned to the capital to report on his work. These 2 are talents. If you want to keep them, send them to Crimson City. Tell Gao Xiong and Lung Song to arrange for people to keep an eye on them 24 hours a day. They can go and see everything, but they can't leave or do anything. After handing over the information on Yu Qian and Shen Yu to Tiger's Mane, Yang Qindong's expression hardened. He looked at the information on Xisheng on the last piece of paper and said, "As for this person, take care of him on the spot. But do it cleanly, and no one can see any problems. Can you do it?" "Yes," Tiger's Mane excitedly replied. Then he leaned forward and asked, "Young master, can I personally take care of this matter?" "No." Yang Qindong decisively shook his head. "You are this young master's subordinate. Everyone knows that. If you disappear at this time, people will inevitably become suspicious. How about this? Let Dao Zhao's group take care of this matter. Don't they complain every day that they have nothing to do? If this matter fails, then they can just return to Crimson City and become a supporting soldier. If they want to join the Cold Front, they will have to face even more difficult and stringent tests." Seeing how straightforward Yang Qindong was, Tiger's Mane knew that there was no chance for him to take advantage of this matter. He immediately stood at attention and replied, "Young master, please rest assured. This matter will be handled beautifully." Chapter 109. Nanjing's Yangzhou Prefecture. As the capital of the Ming Dynasty and now a subsidiary capital, this place was still bustling with activity. Moreover, the climate was pleasant. So much of the Ming Dynasty's wealth had been gathered here. Yangzhou Prefecture was the most prosperous of all places. Not only were there all sorts of goods, but because the heavens were high and the emperor was far away, the entertainment industry was also very developed. Xisheng and his 10 brothers were enjoying themselves here. He had originally wanted to annoy Yang Qindong a little, so he had his brothers send a message to the imperial censors. This had led to the impeachment of Yang Qindong in the imperial court, which had led to the emperor imposing taxes on the immortal abode. allowing him to vent some of his anger. But soon after, he suffered the consequences of his own actions. Because he had acted on his own initiative, he had incurred the wrath of Wang Zhen. He had left the capital this time to avoid the storm. In his big brother's words, he should leave the capital and have some fun. Once he was tired and the capital was calm, he would naturally be called back. Knowing that this was the result of his big brother's compromise with Wang Zhen, Xisheng obediently left the capital and came to Yangzhou, a place of pleasant weather and romance. As soon as he entered this place, Xisheng had the feeling of a dragon entering the sea. He brought a dozen brothers to eat and drink every day, which was very comfortable. At night, he would find a very famous local flower to sleep. It was really like being a groom every day, living like an immortal. But all of this would come to an end tonight, because Dao Xiao had personally come. And with him were 3 of Lungfeng's brothers. All of them were extremely skilled in firearms. Dao Xiao had taken on 3 missions this time. Kill Xisheng, capture Yu Qian, and capture Shen Yu. He had assigned 3 of his brothers to each of the last 2 missions. Yu Qian was just a scholar without the strength to truss a chicken, so sending 3 of his brothers was already giving them face. As for Xisheng's mission, he had to do it himself. Although Xisheng had injured the 6th young master, which had been part of the plan, the guards had still been dissatisfied. Based on what they had said, if anyone offended the 6th young master, they should just kill them. What was the point of trying to injure themselves to gain the enemy's confidence? However, this was an order personally given by the 6th young master. As soldiers, it was their duty to obey orders, so there was nothing they could say. Now that he had the opportunity, how could he let Xisheng go so easily? After entering Yangzhou, he quickly met up with the person in charge of the security bureau. After finding out where Xisheng was going tonight, and which entertainer he had taken a fancy to, Dao Xiao quickly started making plans. In Dao Xiao's words, since this brat likes women so much, then let him die on a woman's belly. With a general direction in mind, the next step was to make various preparations, as well as various disguises and infiltrations. He had experienced this many times in the past when he entered the Coal Peak trial, so naturally, he was extremely familiar with it. Very quickly, one of his subordinates took on the role of a pimp, another was in charge of keeping watch, and another was in charge of receiving and retreating. Naturally, the matter of attacking Xisheng was left to Dao Xiao. He was playing with a bottle of medicine in his hand. These were all aphrodisiacs. After taking them, even if he was facing a sow, he would not be able to control himself. He wanted to see Xisheng's wonderful performance tonight. The sky was dark. As expected, Xisheng led a group of subordinates into the ambush that Dao Xiao had prepared beforehand. Once he entered, he could not wait to find the room of the star of the place, the lady called Cai Tianxian, and walked in. However, the moment he entered the room, a pimp followed behind him. At this moment, Xisheng was anxiously taking off his clothes, and was about to get on the bed to wait for the lady's arrival. Suddenly, he heard movement behind him, and the footsteps did not belong to a lady. Out of habit, he drew his spring-embroidered saber. "Dear customer, don't be nervous. I'm here to give you medicine. After taking these things, I guarantee that you will be more energetic. A night as a bridegroom only costs 1 tael of silver. It's cheap, right?" The pimp did not show any fear when facing Xisheng, who was holding a saber. Instead, he walked forward to promote the things in his hands. Originally, when he saw that it was a pimp who came in, Xisheng thought that he was too nervous. Especially when he heard that the other party was promoting pills, he did not take the other party seriously. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "Get out of here. This young master's body is very good. I don't need those things." The pimp should have left after he finished speaking. However, he did not expect that the other party would take another step forward. At the same time, he kept saying, "Dear customer, my medicine is really good. If you don't try it, you'll regret it. Get out." Seeing that the pimp was actually getting closer to him, Xisheng was a little angry. The other party had disturbed his elegance. Even if he killed the other party here, it would not be a big deal. It would just be a lowly record. After he killed the other party, he would just have to report it to the local authorities. The spring-embroidered saber was raised high, as if it would fall at any time. However, the pimp standing opposite him was not afraid at all. Instead, he opened his mouth and said, "Dear customer, you are being unreasonable. I brought you something out of kindness. If you don't want it, just don't want it. Why do you have to fight?" The pimp's calmness gave Shisheng a bad feeling. However, he could not figure out what was wrong. While he was hesitating, he suddenly felt a strong wind coming from behind. Instinctively, he wanted to turn around. However, because his attention was on the pimp, he needed time to turn around. Just as he turned around, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his neck. Then he fainted on the ground. Dao Xiao appeared behind Shisheng. Looking at the unconscious man, he shook his head and said, "Such a lack of vigilance. I don't know how you became a Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard." After saying this, Dao Xiao angrily said to the man who acted as the pimp, "Chen Gang, how did you act? You did not show the slightest bit of fear. You almost alerted him. Do you know that if he shouted outside, our plan would have failed?" "Yes, Captain, please calm down. I was also angry when I saw Shisheng. How could I have thought of pretending to be afraid?" The subordinate called Chen Gang hurriedly admitted his mistake. He was afraid that Dao Xiao would continue to scold him on this issue, so he said, "Captain, let's hurry up. That Cai Tianxian has gone to take a bath. I'm afraid she will be back soon." "Oh right." Only then did Dao Xiao remember that this place was not safe. It was also not the time to make a conclusion. He nodded and let Chen Gang help the unconscious Shisheng up. Then Dao Xiao poured all the pills in the bottle into Shisheng's mouth. After Shisheng drank some water, he completely digested the pills. Then he carried Shisheng back to the bed. One of them left through the window, while the other left through the door. After a short while, Cai Tianxian, who had just finished her bath, entered the room. When she saw that Shisheng was already on the bed, she couldn't help but reveal a coquettish look on her face. Then she swayed her hips and walked to the bed. She had just taken off her clothes when Shisheng woke up. The first thing he saw was Cai Tianxian, who looked like a little white rabbit. His eyes turned red and he pounced on her. Then there was a loud shaking sound from the wooden bed. Shisheng was dead. The next morning, when the subordinates saw that the Qianhu had not come out of the room, they knocked on the door and entered. The first thing they saw was Shisheng lying dead on the bed with his eyes wide open. Cai Tianxian had also died with him. She had been tortured to death. His subordinate hurriedly did a checkup and concluded that Qianhu she had died of natural causes, due to consuming too much aphrodisiac. Immediately, the news was sent to the Xining eunuch in the capital with the express speed of 600 li. At the same time that Shisheng died, the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel, an imperial censor Xinyu, appeared on a ship. That ship was sailing through the sea, and its destination was Crimson City. "Isn't this imperial censor Shen? Why are you here?" Looking at the boundless ocean around him, then looking at his former colleague, Yu Qian's eyes widened, his face filled with curiosity and confusion. "I don't know. This lowly official only took a nap. When I opened my eyes, I was already here." Xinyu shook his head, a confused look on his face. "It seems like we've been kidnapped." Yu Qian was smart and immediately understood his situation. At this moment, he saw a man dressed in camouflage clothes standing not far away. He shouted, "Hey, who are you? Why did you kidnap this official and imperial censor Shen? Do you know that we're very poor? We don't have any money, and no one will come to ransom us." Yu Qian truly didn't have any money. This point made him feel much more at ease. He really wanted to say that they had captured the wrong people, and that they were useless. However, no matter how much Yu Qian shouted, the only response he got was the crashing and slapping of the waves. The soldier not far away seemed to have not heard his shouts, and continued to stand there. He would occasionally glance in their direction, preventing them from jumping into the sea. Yu Qian and Xinyu naturally wouldn't seek death. They wouldn't die before they figured out what was going on. But they also sadly discovered that they didn't know where they were. Where was the ship heading? What would the future hold? They only knew that they had left the Great Ming Dynasty and their future was uncertain. The immortal abode and sky beyond heaven were still very popular. Every day, people would line up to eat and stock up. This was especially true for the immortal abode. It was already the 12th month, and the weather was getting colder and colder. More and more people began to wear cotton robes on the streets. However, no matter how cold it was outside, the immortal abode was still as warm as spring all year round. Some of the private rooms even had to open their windows to let in some warm air. All of this was naturally because of the stove. Chapter 110. Yang Chendong had already considered the problem of the capital's climate. When the immortal abode was first built, he had hired craftsmen to install a large number of furnaces in the mezzanine. Once the weather turned cold and the coals were ignited, the heat would naturally dissipate. The guests quickly noticed that the immortal abode was as warm as spring. After asking around, they learned that it was because of the furnaces. Speaking of which, this sort of invisible heating method was far superior to placing a brazier in one's home. Many people immediately asked if they could pay the craftsmen of the immortal abode to install the furnaces in their homes. This was a business that Yang Chendong had originally planned to make money, so the staff very politely agreed. But because there were only a limited number of craftsmen and limited materials, not only was the installation extremely expensive, they also had to wait in line. But for the sake of keeping their homes as warm as spring, many people paid up and waited in line. This matter quickly spread, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, paid a visit to the Yang clan manor. The potatoes had been harvested long ago, and the seeds had been distributed. The embroidered uniform guard and Eastern Depot soldiers could no longer be seen outside the Yang clan manor. But even so, no one dared to cause trouble here. This was because all signs indicated that Yang Shima had an extremely good relationship with eunuch Wang Zhen. The two would meet from time to time and converse for several hours at a time. With Wang Zhen as the flag, who would be stupid enough to take the initiative to find trouble with Yang Chendong? Although Shi Pu was the Minister of Works, a second-rank official in the imperial court, he was still nothing in front of Wang Zhen. Not only did he not want to offend Wang Zhen, but Minister Shi even got his current position because of Wang Zhen's relationship. Naturally, he had to be extremely polite to Yang Chendong. He couldn't just send an order like he would any other official, so he decided to personally come. Yang Chendong attached great importance to Shi Pu's visit. His father, Yang Rong, had once been the Minister of Works, so their relationship was quite close. When Shi Pu arrived and entered the main hall of the Yang clan manor, he was greeted by a wave of hot air, but he couldn't see a single brazier burning. He immediately knew that this place had to have been installed with furnaces. He couldn't help but say with envy, "Honorable nephew, your place really is like a paradise of immortals." Ah! Yang Chendong clasped his fist in the direction of the capital, a solemn expression on his face. "Uncle Shi praises me too much. This is all thanks to His Majesty's governance, allowing the realm to be at peace and the common people to live and work in peace." "That's right, His Majesty is quite diligent." Shi Pu laughed. The current Ming dynasty looked strong and prosperous, but that was just the capital left behind by Ren Xuanji. When it came to Zhu Qizhen, he put eunuchs in important positions. These court officials, these representatives of Confucianism, were no longer as strong as they used to be. However, Shi Pu wouldn't tell Yang Chendong these things in depth. After all, he was just a junior and didn't deserve any deeper guidance. Listening to Shi Pu's nonchalant words, Yang Chendong chuckled without saying a word. "Uncle Shi, you didn't come here today just to chat with me, right?" "Haha, of course not. Let's not beat around the bush. This time, I'm here for the furnace wall. You see, such a good thing should be shared with everyone." Shi Pu chuckled as if he was working for the country. When it came to serious matters, Yang Chendong's expression became awkward. "What's wrong? Does honorable nephew have some difficulty?" Seeing Yang Chendong's hesitant appearance, Shi Pu felt that this matter wasn't as simple as he had imagined. "Yes." Yang Chendong finally nodded his head and explained, "I won't hide it from Uncle Shi. When I first made this furnace wall, it was just an idea. Later on, I invested a great deal of manpower and resources to understand the principles. For this matter, eunuch Wang also invested a great deal of money. Now that he has a share of the furnace wall, if I were to give it away for no good reason, I'm afraid that even if I agree, there will be others who won't." By raising Wang Zhen's name, Shi Pu was using his influence to suppress others. Looking at Shi Pu's appearance, It was clear that he wanted Yang Qindong to contribute the method of constructing the furnace wall for free. This was something that Yang Qindong couldn't accept. In the society of that time, there was no such thing as property rights. This was especially true for craftsmen. No matter how hard they worked or how much they invested, once they made something good, it would be promoted for free. As for the creator, he wouldn't receive any benefits. At most, the higher-ups would praise him verbally, but in terms of material benefits, there was nothing. This was because from everyone's point of view, the things you made should be contributed. Since it was contributed, why should there be any benefits? Under the heavens, all good things should belong to the emperor, and not a method for personal gain. This seemed to allow more people to benefit, but in reality, it was extremely unfair to the creator. He spent money, time, and talent to make something that was easily used by others. His investment and output weren't proportional at all. In the long run, who would waste time to create something? Even if they didn't create something, they would still receive money. This kind of unfair treatment caused everyone to gradually lose their creativity. Now, Sherpu was asking for this craftsmanship, as if he was an ordinary craftsman. Since he was born and lived in the Great Ming Dynasty, then the things he made should also belong to the Great Ming Dynasty. Therefore, he should give it all to her. He was against this kind of working method in his heart, but he couldn't say it out loud. Why was everyone else like this, but only she was special? Therefore, Yang Qindong could only use Wang Zhen's name to suppress others. A while ago, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Yu Qian, and the Sichuan imperial censor, Xin Yu, suddenly disappeared without a trace. No one knew if they were alive, and no one knew if they were dead. When this matter came out, everyone's suspicions were pointed at Wang Zhen. This was because these two people had all kinds of conflicts with eunuch Wang. Now that they both disappeared, was there anyone else other than Wang Zhen who had this kind of ability? However, there was no evidence, so no one could do anything to Wang Zhen. They could only secretly guard against him. Now that the name was taken out, even Sherpu's expression turned ugly after hearing it. Before he came, he thought that Yang Qindong might not be willing to hand over the craftsmanship, but it didn't matter. He only needed to move him with emotion and reason. After all, he was still a fifth-rank official in the imperial court, so he should have this kind of awareness, right? However, when Wang Zhen's name came out, Sherpu instantly lost his temper. Then other than buying, is there no other way? Sherpu knew that forcing Wang Zhen to hand over the craftsmanship wouldn't work, so he tried to ask. This, logically speaking, is not possible. Yang Qindong shook his head. However, when Sherpu's face turned gloomy, he continued. However, since Uncle Sher has personally come, I still have to give you face. How about this? Your Ministry of Works can provide copper in exchange for me sending someone to make the fireplace. How about it? Nowadays, most of the fireplaces in the market were made of copper and iron, and some of the parts were very delicate. For example, things like the screws were far from what the Ministry of Works could make. If he were to copy them, it was very likely that the quality of the product wouldn't be up to standard, resulting in all sorts of problems. Once a fire broke out, it would be a huge problem. It was precisely because of the uniqueness of this technology that the cost of installation was extremely high, to the point that ordinary officials couldn't accept it. As a result, many officials went to find Sherpu and said that since he was in charge of the Ministry of Works, this matter was within his jurisdiction. How to install the fireplace in everyone's homes should be his responsibility. In the end, these officials just didn't want to spend so much money to enjoy the benefits of the fireplace. Now, Yang Qindong gave a compromise. The technology couldn't be taught, but it could be exchanged with copper. This way, with the large amount of copper in the Ministry of Works warehouse, the problem of installing the fireplace could be solved. It could also be considered as solving Sherpu's urgent problem. Okay, then I'll thank nephew. Knowing that Yang Qindong was giving him face, Sherpu immediately said it as if he was afraid that the other party would go back on his word. Afterwards, the two of them discussed the amount of copper needed to exchange for a fireplace. During this time, Yang Qindong naturally demanded an exorbitant price. Although Sherpu felt that it was a bit high, he thought about how those things were temporarily useless in the warehouse, so he might as well exchange them for benefits first. If there was a shortage, he could just collect them from all over the country. Thus he agreed. In the end, Sherpu left Yangjiao Manor with a satisfied expression. After he left, when Xiao Yin came to clean up the tea, she asked Yang Chendong with curiosity and confusion, "Young master? Since he brought out Wang Zhen's name, why did he agree to exchange copper? This way, won't we earn a lot less money?" Haha, Arine also knows how to use her brain to think about problems. Yang Chendong said with a big smile. "Young master? Ina has always used her brain. It's just that I'm not as smart as you, so I can't see it," Xiao Yin said somewhat coquettishly. Ever since the relationship between the two of them became real, in front of Yang Chendong, she became more and more like a little girl. "Right, young master, you still haven't said why." "Why?" Yang Chendong looked into the distance and was silent for a while before replying. "Even Iner said that I used Wang Zhen's name to scare people. I'm sure the others would think the same, right?" This wasn't what the young master wanted to see. This time, he would let the Ministry of Works arrange the exchange of copper for furnace walls. Firstly, it would serve more people, and secondly, it would be a way to express goodwill to them, so that they wouldn't hate the young master like they hated Wang Zhen. Of course, the most important point is that Qiqian City lacks copper. The industry there is developing too quickly, especially the military factories and shipyards. As more and more advanced products are put into production, the shortage will only increase. Chapter 111. Although Gao Xiong and the others robbed at sea and obtained quite a bit of gold and silver, who would bring copper onto the ship? Now that we have obtained so much copper, we can solve their problem. This is something that no amount of silver can solve. Yang Chendong's explanation and reply allowed Xiao Yin to understand. She immediately said happily, "So you're saying that we've profited this time?" "Of course we've profited." Yang Chendong also smiled and nodded. In his heart, he thought that if it wasn't for the fact that Sherpu and the others couldn't see the importance of copper, they wouldn't have succeeded so easily this time. Sherpu had made a trip to the Yang clan manor, and then transported quite a bit of copper to exchange for ready-made fireplaces. For a moment, this had alleviated the officials' need for fireplaces and received praise from the officials. This had also improved Yang Chendong's reputation among the officials. Before this, there were still a few officials who had installed fireplaces in advance, such as the direct relatives of the Yang clan and the Hu clan. In the Hu clan, no matter how cold it was outside, it was like spring all year round in here. Naturally, this was all thanks to the installation of the fireplaces. We're all thanks to young Mississippi in the bedroom. Xiaoqing, who was still wearing her summer clothes, giggled as she looked at young Miss Huyen who was dressing up in front of the dressing table. Her eyes narrowed into slits as she smiled. "Xiaoqing, you're asking for a beating." Hearing the maidservant teasing her, Huyen, whose face was slightly red, turned around and raised her arm as if to hit Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing had already jumped far away and was still giggling as she said, "Young Miss still won't admit it? Look at those important officials who haven't installed a fireplace. Even those Duke's Manors who spent a lot of money still have to wait in line. Yet, our Hu clan didn't do anything and installed everything that should be installed. Also, the mirror in young Miss's room, the perfume, the glass on the window, which one of them isn't priceless and is limited in supply. Yet, you can see them all here. What does the East Marshal want? Everyone in the capital knows, so how could young Miss not know?" Knowing that she wouldn't be able to hit Xiaoqing, Huyen simply returned to her chair. She shook her unkempt hair and said, "You all know, but why hasn't he come to propose marriage? It's going to be the new year soon, and I'll be 17 years old." "Ah. So young Miss was looking forward to a marriage proposal. You really don't know shame." After little Qing heard this, she skipped over again. "All right, little Qing, I'm talking business with you. You said that he treats me so well, and the whole family can see it, but why didn't he ask for my hand in marriage? What is he waiting for?" Huyen said with a bitter smile. Many 16-year-old girls were already married. However, Yang Chendong didn't even propose marriage, which made her a little uncertain. "I don't know." Once they started talking about serious matters, little Qing regained her serious look and shook her head vigorously. However, she quickly nodded and said, "If we don't know, we can find someone to ask. Isn't young Miss often in contact with big sister Yang? Why don't we find an opportunity to ask her, and let her ask her brother? It shouldn't be a problem, right?" "Yes." Hu Yin nodded, thinking that little Qing's idea was not bad. In her mind, she began to think of a time to go to the Wangfu and see Yang family's eldest sister, Yang Fei, to sound her out. 1449, the first month of the 14th year of the Zhengtang dynasty. Within Qiqian City, with the agreement of Gao Xiong, Leng Song, and a bunch of military officers, instructors and political instructors, the attack on Lukang began. They used 2 months to get a clear understanding of the situation in Lukang and Taichung. Coincidentally, the shipyard had developed a new generation of fast ships, and they had officially tested it, proving its superiority. When the Navy and land forces announced that they would attack Lukang at dawn tomorrow, they would occupy it by land and sea, and then take down Taichung. In order to ensure the success of this operation, and to reduce their own casualties and losses. For this battle, they would use the new ships number 1, number 2, and number 3 as the vanguard, led by Gao Xiong himself. There were 4 new ships. Number 4 went to South America and North America to search for rubber trees, and there were 100 ships of different sizes. There were 100 ships of other models, carrying 3 regular Navy companies, and 2,000 auxiliary Navy soldiers. The moment they appeared, they would appear on Lukang with lightning speed and catch the enemy off guard. On land, Leng Song personally led the troops, using 3 regular army companies and 2,000 auxiliary army soldiers. After taking down Lukang, they went straight for Taichung and took over half of Ryukyu Island. Before this, a total of 3 exercises had been conducted, and any problems that might arise had been properly resolved. Filled with confidence, a total of 4,600 soldiers ate dinner and rested for 4 hours before the army set off. They slowly approached Port Deer without making a single sound. On the ocean, the moonlight shone, and the ripples were like a mirror that had been split into hundreds of pieces, reflecting huge shadows. New number 1, new number 2, and new number 3, which had just been completed by the shipyard, were 3 large and fast ships. Faintly, they appeared in the ocean 20 miles away from Deerport. Behind him, there were hundreds of horse ships, grain ships, warships, and warships of all kinds. Gao Xiong, who was leading the team, stood in the command cabin of the new number 1 ship. When he looked up, a dark cloud happened to appear, blocking the bright moonlight. He was the one who issued a clear and loud order. "Let's go." Just as the order was given, the sound of the ship's engine starting could be heard. Back then, the ships relied on human power to move the sails when there was wind, but the oars when there was no wind. The biggest difference between the new ships and them was that they had internal combustion engines, usually diesel engines, that were connected by shafts and had propellers that spun. The propellers would stir the water, and the water would give a reaction force that would be transmitted to the ship through the shafts and diesel engines, pushing the ship forward. This way, not only could they save a lot of manpower and resources, but more importantly, they were extremely fast. It was only a distance of 20 miles, but they arrived at Deer Harbor in less than 15 minutes. They had never thought that someone would come looking for trouble from the sea. At this moment, the gates were wide open, like an unguarded city that never sleeps. It wasn't until the number 1, number 2 and number 3 warships lined up in a straight line, and prepared their Type 90-60mm mortars to fire that the warships belonging to the First Shang dynasty in Deerport finally came to their senses. In the dark night, it was impossible to see how many enemy ships were there. However, once they discovered the enemy, the 300-odd warships in the harbor were about to retaliate. When the alarm sounded, countless sailors ran out from the military camp on land. From the looks of it, they were about to board the ship to face the enemy. In the harbor, there were more than 10 warships from the First Shang dynasty that were stationed there all year round. They were about to turn and face the enemy. Attack! If anyone dares to retaliate, sink them all. In the command cabin, Gao Xiong issued orders as he stared intently at Deer Harbor for any signs of movement. Boom boom boom. Following the order, the number 1, number 2, and number 3 cannons on the number 1, number 2, and number 3 ships started firing at the moving enemy ships. The powerful flames were like the brightest beacon in the dark night, instantly lighting up half of Lukong. At the same time, a few moving warships from the first Shang dynasty were hit and destroyed. The powerful modern cannons had an unimaginable attack power. No matter what kind of ship it was, as long as it was hit by the cannons, it would immediately shatter into pieces. There would only be the sound of people screaming and not the slightest bit of resistance. 3 cannons at a time. After 3 consecutive rounds, the precision of the cannons made the first Shang dynasty's warships that were moving like snails into fixed targets. The only thing they could do was to become the target of the cannons and wait for the cannons to hit them. The flames soared into the sky and the sound of people screaming spread out, causing the sailors on land who wanted to board the ships to stop in their tracks in fear. Who is it? How could their firearms be so powerful? If we charge onto the ships now, how is that different from seeking death? The sailors didn't dare to act rashly. After all, no one was an idiot. No one would dare to charge forward even if they knew that they would die. In the command room of number 1, Gao Xiong was looking at the scene in front of him proudly. He didn't give the order to fire the cannons as he was following Yang Qindong's orders. There were too many Han people on Ryukyu Island, and it was best not to kill people of his own race. Furthermore, the 9 cannons were enough to cause the enemy to panic. His ambush mission was already more than half completed. Now he just had to wait for the other ships to catch up. Then it would be time for the army to press forward and seize the ships and captives. Using the fact that the ships behind were too slow and didn't have enough space to catch up, Gao Xiong turned his head and looked at Yu Qian and Xin Yu, who were staring at him in disbelief. 2 sirs? In your opinion, how is the strength of our navy? Amazing. Inconceivable. Simply inconceivable. Wherever the cannons go, who can fight against them? Xin Yu's face was full of shock as he sighed. Even Yu Qian, an important minister recorded in the history of the Ming dynasty, a man who had once single-handedly reversed the history of the Ming dynasty, didn't have a trace of calmness at this moment. His eyes were also wide open as he stared at the scene in front of him. In fact, what Yu Qian saw was too many things that could surprise him. Ever since he was captured and transported to Qiqian City, he felt that everything he saw was like a dream. The spacious cement roads in the city, the orderly streets, the lush green trees, the rosy complexions of the people who were happy every day, and the new army that always maintained a high spirit. All of this was something he didn't even dare to dream about. Chapter 112. Everyone had something to do and money to earn. Regardless of their birth, as long as one of their parents was Han, they would be able to receive a good education from a young age. When people fell sick, they would have money to treat them, and the greatest guarantee was the possibility of dying from illness. There were 3 meals a day, not 2. Not only that, they could eat meat for every meal, and everyone had new clothes to wear. This seemed to be something that only humans could dream of, right? But right now, all of this was happening in Crimson City. Those bright windows were something that even the Great Ming Imperial Palace didn't have the money to install, but it was extremely common here. There were also power plants, munitions factories, furniture factories, garment factories, cement factories, shipyards, glass factories, paper factories, and so on that he had never heard of before. Wherever he went, he was shocked, and it was the kind of shock that went straight to the bottom of his heart. If it wasn't for Crimson City, he wouldn't have known that the world could be so beautiful. After 2 months of visiting, Yu Qian finally found out that this was the property of Yang Shima, who didn't have a high position in the capital and didn't have much authority. Everything here was made by this person. This place was even more prosperous than the capital in Nanjing, and it was actually the private property of the 6th young master of the Yang clan? Then what was he trying to do? Yu Qian couldn't understand, or rather he didn't dare to think about it. But after witnessing the naval battle of Deer Harbor tonight, he finally realized that his suspicions were about to come true. As an official of the Great Ming Dynasty, the first thing he had to do was to spread the news of this place. It would be best if he could let all the officials in the court know about what was happening in Crimson City. But could he escape? And if he really did go out, would anyone believe him if he told them what he saw? Even if someone believed him, with the current military strength of the Ming Dynasty, Would they be able to defeat the new army in Crimson City? All sorts of thoughts flashed through his mind like a movie. Yu Qian realized that the expansion of Crimson City was unavoidable, and it wasn't something that could be stopped by human strength. Gao Xiong chuckled and proudly looked at the two people who were named by the sixth young master to take special care of. From his point of view, what important officials of the great Ming dynasty. At this moment, they had probably been blinded by everything in front of them, and were scared out of their wits. On the land of Deer Harbor, thousands of sailors stood there, not daring to move. The flames in front of them seemed to be a warning to them. If they dared to step into the warship, they would be smashed into smithereens. Who wouldn't be afraid of death? This was especially so for the first Shang dynasty, who knew that they would definitely die and couldn't even pay their soldiers. Hesitation could be seen in the eyes of the soldiers. What's going on? Why haven't you boarded yet? What are you waiting for? A loud roar sounded out. Just as the Navy members were hesitating to move forward, a man wearing the first Shang dynasty's military uniform rushed over with his troops. General Pan has come. Some of the sailors had already recognized the identity of the person who had come. Pan Tao, the general guarding Deer Harbor. He was also one of the trusted generals of the first Shang dynasty's 13-year-old king, Shangda. It was because of Pan Tao's existence that Deer Harbor became an impregnable pass. It became the biggest barrier between Qiqian City and the first Shang dynasty. Pan Tao also heard the commotion outside, and brought thousands of troops over. From afar, he first saw the flames that soared into the sky. Following that, he saw the thousands of sailors standing together on the shore in a mess. Seeing that a huge battle was about to happen, all the sailors actually didn't board the warship but stayed on the shore. Instantly he was furious. Just as he got closer, a loud roar sounded out. The sailors who were originally hesitating were all frightened when they saw Pan Tao bringing his troops over. They started to walk towards the warship that was anchored at the harbor. This Pan Tao was famous for killing people without blinking. If they stayed here, they would be killed by this person before they could be killed by the powerful cannons. Since they were going to die no matter what, they might as well try their luck on the warship. Over 300 warships. Even if only a third of them managed to make it out, it would still be a bloody battle for the Yang family navy. Even if they had advanced weapons, casualties would still be unavoidable. The situation of the battle seemed to be changing. At this moment, the Yang family army that was already prepared on land began to move. Sniper rifle, can you find Pan Tao's exact location? Lung Song, who was hiding 800 meters away from Deer Harbor, used the night vision binoculars in his hands to see everything that was happening. When he realized that Pan Tao's appearance could cause chaos in the battle and increase the difficulty of taking over Deer Harbor, he asked the sniper beside him who was skilled in shooting. Reporting to battalion commander, there are too many people and they are too densely packed. We can't accurately hit the target. The sniper shook his head dejectedly. Was it because his shooting skills were bad? It wasn't that his observation skills weren't good enough, or that the range of the sniper rifle wasn't good enough. It was just that there were too many people, densely packed and extremely chaotic. It wasn't realistic to want to take Pan Tao's life with one shot. Hearing that the sniper couldn't complete his mission successfully, a sharp glint flashed across Lung Song's eyes. He seemed to have made up his mind as he said, "Rocket launchers, get ready. Everyone move forward. When you have enough range, fire indiscriminately." Originally, he only wanted to take Pan Tao's life. However, the scouts found out that this person was entrusted with an important task by the first Shang dynasty's king, Shangda. It was impossible for him to surrender. Since that was the case, he could only kill him. Although this person was also a descendant of the Han people, if he died, more Han people would submit to him. No matter how he looked at it, it was worth it. However, the situation didn't allow it. He could only let Lung Song kill more people. War had always been cruel, and there was no right or wrong. This was because history was written by the victors. Lung Song gave the order, and the 3 companies of 300 outstanding Cold Vanguard soldiers moved forward with him. Behind them were 2,000 auxiliary soldiers. Even though they were auxiliary soldiers, their movements were still nimble. Even though they were following behind the main soldiers, they weren't too far behind. On Deerport, because of Pan Tao's appearance, there were Navy members who were walking towards their ships. However, no matter how you looked at it, these people's speed wasn't fast enough. They were like crawling snails. All of you hurry up. Whoever is behind will be punished for disobeying orders. Behead. Seeing that this was going to continue, who knew how long it would take for them to form enough resistance on the sea? Pan Tao roared angrily. As expected, the moment the order was given, the Navy members' movements became much faster. In the new command cabin, Gao Xiong was observing everything through his binoculars. When he saw more enemies boarding the ships, he couldn't help but say anxiously, "This Lung Song, what is he doing? Why isn't he launching a land attack? Forget it, forget it. Order the cannons to extend and fire at the enemies boarding the ships." Boom boom boom. The 3 new ships fired 3 cannons as planned, hitting the intersection of the waterways in Deerport. The powerful shockwave from the explosion instantly took away at least 100 lives. The number of injured people who were hit by the shockwave was uncountable. After the 3 cannons were fired, Lung Song led the army to the left side of the enemy 200 meters away. Immediately, 5 rocket launchers fired at the same time, launching an indiscriminate attack. Wherever General Pan Tao was suspected to be, he became the focus of the firepower. Boom 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 boom. After the 5 consecutive shots, under the powerful firepower, a large number of enemies fell to the ground. Waves of cries and howls could be heard. Countless broken limbs were scattered everywhere. Advance in attack formation. Anyone who doesn't surrender, kill. Lung Song saw that the first wave of rocket launchers had caused heavy damage to the enemy. He was the first to stand up from the ground. Following him, the 300 soldiers of the Lung army marched forward in a straight line, maintaining a complete formation. Yang Chendong had taught them before that if they could attack, they shouldn't defend. He also said that attacking was the best defense, and also the last resort to solve all problems. Following this order, and to reduce the number of casualties, Lung Song decided not to attack. Once they attacked, they had to hurt the enemy until they didn't know which direction was north, south, east and west. Only then would they choose to surrender faster. The 300 soldiers of the Lung army spat out tongues of fire from their guns. In the darkness, they were like an unbreakable fire net as they closed in step by step. Behind them, the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers wielding large swords and spears weren't idle either. Although they couldn't walk in front with spears because of their status, they still shouted in unison, "Those who surrender will not be killed. Those who surrender will not be killed." In the chaos of the cannons, the place where Pan Tao was at became the focus of the attack. After losing contact with the general, facing the continuous barrage of fire, those who wanted to attack with swords were shot and fell to the ground, not moving at all. Under such a strong pressure, the Shang dynasty soldiers guarding Deerport were forced to retreat. Countless times, reality told them that those who wanted to charge with weapons would inevitably die. In such a situation where they would die if they charged forward, no one could muster up the courage to charge forward. Just as the army was advancing with an unstoppable momentum, the Yang family navy finally arrived. Under the primitive speed of the boat, which only relied on the sails and the rowers, the distance of 20 miles took them nearly 2 incense sticks of time longer than the other boats. But no matter what, they still managed to arrive. Then it was the arrival of the army. The huge commotion had already created a psychological pressure on the soldiers of Deerport. Those who kneel and surrender will not be killed. Chapter 113. The shouts continued to come from the mouths of the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers. These shouts were the last straw that broke the camel's back. Seeing that the tide was turning, the first Shang dynasty soldier finally threw his weapon to the ground, squatted down and hugged his head, making a gesture of surrender. With the first person, the second, the third, and soon, the sound of weapons being thrown to the ground could be heard. This army had completely lost their morale. The Yang family navy quickly stationed themselves at Deer Harbor. Large batches of auxiliary soldiers walked out of the warships and picked up the weapons that were thrown on the ground in an orderly manner. Then, groups of captives were tied together like candied haws. Battalion Commander Gao, I'll leave this place to you. I'll lead the army and rush to Taichung City. We'll try to liberate the place before dawn. Lung Song walked in front of Gao Xiong, who had just landed, and saluted with a hint of excitement on his face. Some people were born to be soldiers. They weren't afraid of war. On the contrary, if there was no war, they would feel that something was missing. Lung Song and Gao Xiong were clearly such people. All right, Battalion Commander Lung, just go. Leave this place to me. Oh right, do you need me to send some men to assist you? After all, Taichung is a big city on Ryukyu Island. Gao Xiong asked with concern. No need. According to the investigation, there aren't many soldiers there. I'll lead 3 companies of Lung Feng and 2,000 auxiliary soldiers to control the place. Let's go. Lung Song rejected Gao Xiong's support and turned to lead the army towards Taichung City. Keep a close eye on the captives. But remember, don't abuse them or scold them. Gao Xiong watched as Lung Feng left and began to clean up the mess. What was worth mentioning was that Yu Qian and Shen Yu were also busy. They did not know that after more than 2 months of experience, they had gradually begun to adapt to the environment and life here. Moreover, they had already subconsciously treated themselves as a part of Crimson City, doing what they could to the best of their abilities. Taichung City. The city walls were more than 10 meters tall, and could be considered one of the biggest cities on Ryukyu Island. There were nearly 200,000 people here. Many of them had migrated here from the mainland. They slowly adapted to life here and spread their branches and leaves. Deer Harbor was only a dozen or so kilometers away. When the cannons roared in the distance, the citizens in the city could more or less sense it. This caused many people to anxiously stay at home, not daring to go out and ask around. It was like the darkness before dawn, causing the entire city to be under a terrifying pressure. It was as if any spark could ignite it. After more than an hour, Lung Song led the army to Taichung City. With their arrival, the city gates opened from the inside. This was the work of the infiltration team. The city gates opened and without much effort, the army entered the city. Following that, they quickly took control of the important officials of the First Shang Dynasty and the 4 city gates. As for the less than 500 guards in the city, they were either killed or surrendered. There was no third option. They took control of the entire Taichung City in an instant. This was the well-trained Lung Feng. They did not harm a single person, nor did they steal anything from the citizens. The next morning, when some brave citizens pushed open their doors and walked out onto the streets, they realized that there were many tall, fit and energetic young soldiers. They were different from the original city guards. They were courteous and did not offend the people. When some people fell on the street out of fear of seeing them, these patrolling and maintaining law and order soldiers would stop and help them up. They were as amiable as big brothers who had been neighbors for many years. The actions of the auxiliary soldiers eventually influenced the citizens in the city. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and more citizens walked out of their homes. Taichung City was as before. With lightning speed, they took down Deer Harbor in a single night. Under the rapid march, they took down Taichung City without shedding a drop of blood. This caused the situation on Ryukyu Island to change drastically. Originally, with Crimson Castle as the base, it only took up 1/8 of the entire Ryukyu Island. However, after taking down Qishan, Alishan, Yushan, Lukang and Taichung, they had taken over at least 2/3 of the island. The remaining 1/3 was where the First Shang Dynasty's capital was located, which was the central north region. However, it was also the most densely populated place on Ryukyu Island. In the Battle of Deer Harbor and Taichung, they killed more than 1,000 enemies and captured more than 11,000 people. This greatly increased the population of the Yang clan, allowing them to reach a population of 400,000. Including the auxiliary soldiers, they had close to 10,000 people. They took over 300 ships and more than 5,000 sailors. This battle greatly increased the strength of the Yang clan. At the same time, it allowed them to become the strongest faction on Ryukyu Island. The Battle of Deer Harbor was a battle where they won with a small number of people. At the same time, it also proved that quality was more important than quantity. However, at this time, whether it was Gao Xiong or Lung Song, they didn't want to expand their gains and enter the central region. Under the rapid development, The Yang clan needed to stabilize and digest. They didn't want to continue swallowing. Otherwise, there might be internal chaos. Yang Chendong once said that battles had to be fought one by one and cities had to be conquered one by one. One shouldn't only think about conquering territory and neglect internal development. If that happened, the quality of life of the people would deteriorate. If that happened, the building might collapse at any time. What the new army needed now was to digest everything that they had just obtained. This might take half a year or even longer. These people needed to redistribute the land, learn new things, learn how to be hygienic and polite, and completely integrate into the Yang clan system. In half a year, they would only learn the surface. Fortunately, both the new army and Yang Chendong, who was their leader, were young enough. They still had time to develop everything. Moreover, they could use this time to negotiate with the first Shang dynasty and see if there was any hope of peacefully taking over the central region and reducing the killing. Negotiation. This was one of the Yang clan's methods, a way to stall for time. They needed to digest their gains. Negotiation. This was indeed the only way for the first Shang dynasty to resolve the current crisis. After Lung Song expressed his willingness to negotiate, the other party's diplomatic group arrived. They were extremely humble and directly expressed their intention to submit. They expressed that they were willing to become a vassal state and were willing to pay tribute every year. However, they also stated their request, which was to ensure the existence of autonomy. With Taichung as the dividing line, the northern region would belong to the first Shang dynasty, and the southern region would belong to the Yang clan. Such an outcome was clearly not in line with Yang Chendong's previous plans. He wanted to fully occupy Little Ryukyu Island. Since they couldn't come to an agreement, they could talk slowly. Once the new army digested their gains, they could start another war and completely solve the problem of Little Ryukyu Island. Yang Chendong's forces were developing rapidly. In the capital, he was quietly preparing for the new year in the Yang clan manner. 1449, the 14th year of the Zhengzhou dynasty. This year would be recorded in the annals of history. If everything went as expected, the famous Tumu Fortress incident would occur this year, signifying the beginning of the Ming dynasty's decline. In truth, from the moment he entered the capital, Yang Chendong had been thinking about his next move. He already knew what was going to happen. With Yang Chendong's abilities, he was completely capable of changing history and nipping in the bud. But he had never done so. In fact, he had only been using his troops on Little Ryukyu Island. In the Great Ming, he had only been developing commerce and establishing Yangbao and the Immortal Abode. He was afraid that if he made too big of a move, it would affect the course of history. In the current Ming dynasty, eunuchs were in power, causing all the ministers to feel insecure. Treacherous officials were in power, and even the position of eunuch was hereditary. If this continued, something would happen to the Great Ming sooner or later, and the only ones to suffer would be the common people. As a Han, Yang Chendong naturally didn't want to see his compatriots suffer. What he wanted was to see the Han grow stronger and become the rulers of the world. For this goal, the hundreds of thousands of Han brothers in the Tumu Fortress incident could only become sacrificial lambs. With a sigh, Yang Chendong thought about how many loyal officials and generals would die in the Tumu Fortress incident. This was a loss for the Great Ming, a loss for the country. But when he thought about how he couldn't do anything with his current status and influence, even if he mobilized the Chizian army, he might draw the ire of the imperial court and the tolerance of the Walla. After all, to resist foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. Young master, big sister is here. Yang Chendong sighed in his study when he saw Qiaoyin enter with a smile. Big sister is here? Hearing that Yang Fei was here, Yang Chendong immediately got up and went out to welcome her. Among his brothers and sisters, he had the deepest feelings for his big sister, and he respected her the most. Other than the fact that she had raised him when he was young, it was also because Yang Fei gave him the feeling that she was like a mother. In the main hall of the Yang family manor, Yang Fei sat on a chair and tasted tea. Behind her stood two personal maids. Thinking back, when Yang Fei got married, the Yang family was at the peak of its power, so she naturally married into a good family. At that time, the Wang family was also a large family. Now Big Sister's husband Wang Meng had become a rank 5 official at the Ministry of Rights in his early 40s. Wang Meng was a scholarly person, and he treated Yang Fei with respect. The two of them had always lived in harmony. Yang Fei was knowledgeable and had the style of a noble mother. The entire Wang family was managed by her in an orderly manner, and she had been praised by many people. Chapter 114. Just looking at Yang Fei, her life was pretty good and she should be satisfied. But because of her younger brothers and sisters, she had no choice but to worry about them. Sometimes she would even think of ways to help them financially. Over the years, her body was not as good as before. Fortunately, Yang Chendong entered the capital. His appearance changed the situation of the descendants of the Yang family. This made Yang Fei feel that the pressure on her was reduced by a lot. As for her other sisters, they could get 1,000 taels of silver from Yang Chendong every month. After having money, her position in her husband's family naturally rose. In addition, it was rumored that the sixth young master of the Yang family had a good relationship with eunuch Wang Zhen. This made them even more afraid to make things difficult for the Yang family. Suddenly, Yang Fei did not need to worry about her sisters, and felt that she had nothing to do. Not long ago, the daughter of the Hu family, Hu Yan, came looking for her. Although she did not say anything and only gave a simple greeting, Yang Fei knew what she was thinking. Thinking that her little brother would be 19 years old after the new year, it was time to settle the problem of marriage. Thus, she came looking for her before the new year. Big sister. Still wearing his green clothes, Yang Chendong appeared with a smile. He did not know why, but in front of Yang Fei, he could always put down the burden on his body and become relaxed. Is Big Sister's body much better? I still have a few anti-inflammatory medicines here. When Big Sister leaves, bring them back. If you have any headache or fever, you can use them at your discretion. Good, Big Sister's body is already fine. I have troubled little brother. Yang Fei's face was full of smiles. Her eyes were filled with satisfaction and happiness. Originally, she thought that the few young master of the Yang family did not live up to expectations, and that the Yang family would decline from now on. She never thought that Yang Chendong, who did not speak much when he was young, would suddenly change greatly after he grew up and become so talented. This was an unexpected surprise, and also let Yang Fei see the hope of the Yang family rising again. Hehe, you are my big sister. It is natural for little brother to care about you. Regarding Yang Chendong calling him little brother, this special title, not only did Yang Chendong not object, he even felt at ease. He felt that this was a kind of intimacy. Of course, if it was someone else who called him little brother, he would probably be the first to object. Even if his second brother called him little six, he would get angry. That's right, you still know that I'm your big sister? Since little brother is so concerned about big sister should also be concerned about little brother. Tell me, what do you think of the Hu family's Hu Yan? Yang Chendong's face suddenly became much more serious as she stared at Yang Chendong with bright eyes. Hearing that big sister was actually doing this for Hu Yan, Yang Chendong coughed lightly and said somewhat awkwardly, Big sister, little brother is still young. I don't want to. I have no choice but to do so. Let me tell you this time, don't play dumb with me. You have to give big sister a clear attitude. Is it okay or not? If it's okay, I will immediately send someone to the Hu family to propose marriage. If it's not okay, you have to tell them so that they don't get in the way. Yang Fei stared at Yang Chendong for an answer. The reason why she was so serious was probably because whenever she mentioned this matter in the past, Yang Chendong would change the topic, causing her to not know where the topic went every time. Today, she had made sufficient preparations. If she didn't get an answer, she definitely wouldn't give up. Big sister's eyes stared closely at Yang Chendong, causing him to feel even more awkward. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He only scratched his head and said, Little brother thinks that this matter really doesn't need to be too anxious. Yang Chendong, who had always been calm in the face of trouble, and gave others the feeling that he was always successful and ignorant, was indeed at a loss like a child right now. This appearance directly caused Xiaoyin, who was beside him, to cover her mouth and laugh softly. Not only that, The two personal maids following behind Yang Fei also had smiles on their faces. Clearly, they also rarely saw the sixth young master, who had always been calm and collected, reveal such a childish appearance. Big sister Yang Qindong, on the other hand, couldn't help but sigh softly when she saw Yang Qindong in such a difficult position. Little brother, you might think that big sister is a little overbearing, but think about it. Hu Yan has always stayed in the word pavilion for you. Now, she will be 17 after the new year. During this time, who knows how many nobles have come to propose marriage, but they were all rejected. She is waiting for you. Then, even if you think that you are still young, you have to give her an explanation. You can't just wait bitterly like this. What is going on? She wanted Yang Qindong to be responsible for her. If he couldn't bear this responsibility, then he had to tell her, and let her prepare early. At the very least, he couldn't delay her. Yang Qindong knew that Yang Fei's words were very reasonable. He immediately replied, "Yes, big sister is right. How about this? I will propose marriage to the Hu clan at the end of this year." Taking a deep breath, Yang Qindong made his decision. This wasn't just because Yang Qindong knew that Hu Yan liked him. In fact, he also liked this playful and cute girl very much. In addition, her background was the granddaughter of the Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao. She was definitely a descendant of a prestigious family. Marrying such a girl would also be helpful for him when he wanted to leave in the future. This was equivalent to him finding a strong ally in the imperial court. Yang Qindong finally gave an answer. Yang Fei let out a long sigh of relief. "Okay, little brother, this is what you said. I will reply to the Hu clan like this. When the time comes, you can't go back on your words." "I won't go back on my words. I won't go back on my words." Yang Qindong shook his head and smiled bitterly. He really didn't expect that his first marriage in 2 lifetimes would be completed under pressure. Of course, this was also his own choice. If he didn't want to, then in this world, there really wasn't anyone who could make things difficult for him. Seeing that the young master had finally decided on his marriage, Xiao Yin was also happy. Although she was already the young master's bed-warming servant girl, and had even done the deed of husband and wife, she was very clear in her heart that with her background, being able to reach this step was already very difficult. Wanting to become the main wife, this was simply impossible in the society of that time. Fortunately, she had interacted with Hu Yan before. This girl was kind-hearted and should be easy to get along with. Finally deciding on marriage, when the news spread back to the Hu clan, Hu Yan was naturally full of joy. Although she still had to wait for nearly a year, she was willing to endure it. In her opinion, she was destined to be the Dong Shui's bride. As for the night, it wasn't a big deal. The clan head was getting married at the end of the year. When the news spread throughout the Yang clan manor, all of the villagers were extremely happy. Ever since the patriarch came to the Yang village, the villagers' lives were getting better day by day. Today, during the new year, each family was given 20 caddies of meat and 2 taels of silver. This kind of treatment was something that even their ancestors had never experienced before. For a moment, everyone was overjoyed. The bells of the new year rang out, and the capital fell into a celebratory mood. The immortal abode didn't require any seats. Every day, several thousand people came in and money poured in. The novel programs and moving music made everyone who entered applaud. Naturally, this place became a popular place for wealthy guests. Just the number of people who applied for membership cards increased by several times. The total number of people who applied for 3 types of membership added up to 3,000. Just the sheer number of members made it so that if one wanted to spend money in the immortal abode, they had to make a reservation in advance. This made the business even more explosive. A large amount of money flowed into Yang Qindong's hands, causing others to gnash their teeth in anger. Some of the restaurants in the area and even some of the red light district's businesses were greatly affected. With new music to listen to, who would want to listen to old songs that had been memorized countless times? The popularity of the immortal abode naturally drew the envy of many, but compared to the profits of the sky beyond heaven, it paled in comparison. The sky beyond heaven silently opened for business 3 days after the immortal abode opened for business. Because of the novelty of its products, it instantly became popular. This was especially true after the Immortal Abode introduced a limited supply system. Many merchants had no choice but to squeeze their way in. Putting aside the other products, only 500 large bags of toilet paper were sold each day, for a total of 5,000 small bags. This was simply not enough to satisfy the needs of the high officials and nobles of the capital. And this wasn't even taking into account the many wealthy merchants of lower status who still had plenty of money in their pockets. After getting used to this soft paper, who would want to replace it with anything else? Even though a large bag of toilet paper sold for the astronomical price of 2 taels of silver, it was still sold out every morning when the store opened for business. Just this alone made a profit of 2,000 taels of silver, but in reality, even with the cost of transportation, it didn't even make 10 taels of silver. This was an almost invisible cost. Just the unremarkable toilet paper alone could make 2,000 taels of silver a day. That was more than 50,000 taels of silver a month. From this, one could see just how lucrative the profits were. There was also a perfume that no one had ever seen before. Not to mention anything else, just the beautiful glass bottle that was used to package the perfume was worth quite a lot. Only 100 bottles were sold every day, but each bottle was sold at a price of 50 taels. It was enough for the young ladies of the rich families to snatch it up in an instant. In this way, they could make another 100,000 taels of silver a month. There was no need to mention all these things one by one. The popularity of the sky beyond heaven was mainly due to the novelty of its products. Even when other merchants saw them, they felt as if they couldn't touch them. The limited supply of goods made it impossible for them to store large quantities of goods. What if they couldn't even meet the demand in the capital? How could they possibly sell these goods elsewhere? Businessmen were all profit-seeking. For their own interests, they had looked for Yang Fu more than once. This was the spokesperson of Dong Shui in the business world. They expressed that they hoped to get more goods. They even said that they did not care about the price, as long as there were goods for them to sell. After all, no matter how expensive it was, it would still have to be sold at a higher price. Chapter 115. After consulting Yang Qindong on this matter, Yang Fu expressed that the Dong Shui, in order to ensure that the common people of the Great Ming could enjoy the benefits of these high-class goods, decided to provide a certain amount of goods to the merchants. As for the quantity, it could be twice as much as the daily limit in the capital. But there were also conditions. First, the highest bidder would win, and second, the goods could not appear on the market in the capital. This method of bidding was naturally Yang Qindong's idea. He knew that the nature of merchants was to seek profit. As long as they could obtain profit, they wouldn't care about what sort of people they were dealing with. They wouldn't care about the righteousness of the country or etiquette or shame. It was just like how in the later stages of the dynasty, the merchant groups and the power groups would collude, all of them aiming for military provisions and equipment. As a result, the Great Ming's defeat had been caused by internal strife. Since they didn't know any better, he might as well earn some of their money. At the very least, with this money in Yang Qindong's hands, he could guarantee that it would be used for the people of the Great Han. After making up his mind, Yang Qindong had Crimson City provide a large amount of goods, and for the sake of saving costs, he even had these merchants go directly to the Tientsin Wharf to pick up the goods. Of course, in principle, the highest bidder would win. This method made the Tientsin Wharf much more lively. Many merchants gathered here, and whenever they obtained a batch of goods through bidding, they would immediately head south to sell them. For a moment, the goods of the Yang clan were spread all over the country. Of course, the one who earned the most was still Yang Qindong, and his influence naturally grew. China was a country of connections, and anything could be done through connections. This seemed to have become a law that would never change. In order to obtain even more goods, many people sought out Yang Qindong through connections, such as his sixth sister, Yang Qin. Before Yang Qindong had come to the capital, Yang Qin had lived a good life, but her status had been very low. This was all because she had married a merchant. Being a third-class merchant meant that she couldn't even compare to the son of a good family. This made it very difficult for her to raise her head in front of her brothers and sisters. With the appearance of Yang Qindong, everything changed. Not only did her most capable sixth brother not look down on her, but he also took good care of her sister. Not only did he give her a monthly salary of 1,000 taels of silver, he also took care of her husband's business quite a bit. It was as if he was taking goods from the Yang family. Other merchants had to bid to obtain the goods, but the Bai family was able to obtain the best quality goods at an internal price from time to time. This allowed their family business to flourish very quickly. Yang Chendong had bestowed this body with the benefits of not forgetting his loved ones when he was rich. Since he had taken over this body, he had to at least treat him well. Otherwise, how was he going to face him after 100 years? Yang Chendong didn't want to do anything wrong, and he didn't want to let down anyone who treated him well. Therefore, as long as he could help, he wouldn't be stingy to the Yang family. In comparison, there were some people who took advantage of him and still wanted to scheme against him. This person was Zhu Qizhen of the Great Ming Dynasty. The popularity of the immortal abode in sky beyond heaven, especially the latter, which could be described as close to 10,000 taels of gold a day, deeply stimulated him, the current emperor. Looking at the annual income of his national treasury, which was only 4 to 5 million taels of silver, he heard that this number could be earned by Yang Chendong in 2 months. This made him envious and jealous at the same time. Slowly, he forgot that Yang Chendong had once brought him high-yield potatoes. He began to think about how to deal with the East Marshal and obtain more benefits. In the inner court of the imperial palace, Zhu Qizhen saw that Empress Qian was doing some needlework out of boredom. She even said that it was for the sake of generating income for the imperial palace. He couldn't suppress his anger. How could a small crown prince wash horses and earn several times more money than him, the emperor? Why would the empress, who was the mother of the world, want to work to earn more money? Wasn't this showing that he, the emperor, was too incompetent? When a person began to have an idea, it was very difficult to take it back. Zhu Qizhen was the same. Ever since he remembered Yang Chendong, he thought about how to use a method to take a large amount of gold and silver from his hands. This caused him to be unable to sleep at night. Although Zhu Qizhen was the emperor, there were too many things in the world that he could not do anything about. For example, the interests of the officials were not something that he could touch as he wished. Ever since Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty dismissed the 100 schools of thought and respected only Confucianism, Confucianism became the orthodox ideology of feudal society. Under this kind of education system, some of the scholars became the upper class and nobles. In order to ensure that their children and grandchildren could also enjoy glory and wealth, they naturally gathered together. Everyone would swarm to oppose any policies and decisions that targeted them. On the contrary, they would fully support any actions that were beneficial to them. As time passed, their power became greater and greater. Even if a dynasty was destroyed, these people could still change schools and continue their glory. One of the most classic examples was the Kong family. A dynasty's legacy was only 300 to 400 years. Even if it was the Xia, Shang and Zhou dynasties, the strongest dynasty was only the Ji family's 800 years of history. However, a scholar's family was able to continue for 2,000 years. It had to be said that this was a miracle in the history of the world. This was an existence that Zhu Qizhen could not afford to offend. At least, if he wanted to touch these people, he needed a good reason. Yang Chendong was born in the Yang family, and could be considered a descendant of a prestigious family. Now that he was a secondary class rank 5 official, and was also a high scholar, if he wanted to touch him, he would not be able to convince everyone without a good reason. But what made Zhu Qizhen even more depressed was that his teacher, Wang Zhen, actually had a good personal relationship with Yang Chendong. Wang Zhen had spoken good words for Yang Chendong in front of him more than once. This made Zong feel that if he told his teacher about his plan to deal with Yang Chendong, it would most likely not work. Since he could not tell anyone, Zhu Qizhen wanted to do it himself. Just as he was thinking of the best way to solve this problem, an opportunity came. His third sister, Princess Changde, was about to celebrate her 14th birthday. Princess Changde was the third daughter of the late Emperor Zhu Zhanji. She and Zhu Qizhen shared the same father and mother as each other, and was often called the third princess, because when she was just born, her father had passed away. Zhu Qizhen, as the older brother, had given his younger sister enough brotherly love. Because of this, she was unruly and willful from a young age, slowly becoming an existence that gave her older brother, the emperor, a headache. Every year, whenever it was Princess Changda's birthday, it was also a time for Zhu Qizhen to be troubled. This younger sister's temper was really bad. If there was anything that did not go her way, she would beat and scold them on the spot. When it was her birthday, it was even more so. If her wishes were not satisfied, not only would the eunuchs and palace maids suffer, even he would not be in a good mood. This once-a-year headache was coming again. While Zhu Qizhen was having a headache, he suddenly thought of Yang Chendong. Didn't you say that you were multi-talented? Didn't others say that you were omnipotent? That's good. This third princess' birthday will be in your hands. If it was done well, then it would naturally be a matter of course. On the other hand, if it was not done well, then he would find a legitimate reason to do it. He did not ask for anything to be done to you. You only needed to take out some money and give it to Zhan. If this was the case, then the other ministers would not be able to do anything, right? Could it be that if you did a bad job, then there would be a problem if you just took out some money? With this thought in mind, Zhu Qizhen unexpectedly took the initiative to come to the third princess courtyard for the first time. This made the eunuchs and palace maids who passed by very surprised. They could not understand. What was wrong with the emperor today? Normally, he would not be able to avoid them. Why did he take the initiative to come forward today? Princess Changda was currently swinging on a swing in her courtyard. Several palace maids and eunuchs were still kneeling on the side, tears still flowing from their eyes. Clearly, it was because of the punishment they had just received. The reason for the punishment was even more speechless. It was because these eunuchs and palace maids did not follow her request to swing the swing to a certain height. And this height did not refer to the highest height, but to the exact height of 120 centimeters from the ground. Thinking about it, even if one used a ruler to measure, it would not be able to achieve such precision. But this was Princess Changda's request. If they could not satisfy her request, then they could only be punished. Zhu Qizhen's sudden appearance caused the eunuchs and palace maids in the courtyard to be shocked. At the same time, they all knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live the emperor!" A figure quickly rushed out from the crowd and arrived in front of Ingzong. She excitedly shouted, "Imperial brother, how come you have time to come see your younger sister today?" Seeing the third princess rushing over, because she ran too fast, she almost fell to the ground. Ingzong instinctively wanted to dodge. This kind of thing had happened countless times. Once Princess Changda fell to the ground, there would be a burst of howling and crying. As the emperor, if he did not bleed, then there would be no way to stop it. After instinctively taking a step back, Yang Chendong's figure suddenly appeared in Zhu Qizhen's mind. Zhu Qizhen's footsteps naturally came to a stop, and he immediately pulled Princess Changda into a tight embrace. Princess Changda hugged Zhu Qizhen tightly and said coquettishly, "Imperial brother, your younger sister is about to turn 14. Haha, I know. This time we came precisely because of Changda's matter. This time we plan to have Yang Chendong hold a birthday banquet for you. What do you think?" Zhu Qizhen's face was full of smiles as he probed. "Dong Shuai? I've heard of him. Your younger sister has also been to that immortal abode. It's really not bad." A trace of reminiscence appeared in Princess Changda's eyes. She then said happily, "Imperial brother, are you planning to reserve the entire immortal abode?" "Of course not." Zhu Qizhen shook his head. Reserving the entire immortal abode for a princess' birthday? He would not do such a foolish thing. Those imperial censors would definitely stand up and criticize him. Moreover, that was Yang Chendong's home ground. If he wanted to cause trouble, it would be difficult for him to do so. This was not in line with his original intentions. Chapter 116. Seeing Zhu Qizhen shake his head, Princess Changda was clearly displeased. "If I don't go to the immortal abode, do I have to celebrate my birthday in the palace as usual? That would be too boring." "Who says that it's boring in the palace? In our opinion, whose idea is more important? Everyone says that Yang Chendong is brimming with talent. If he's the one planning it, it'll be just as exciting, right? Of course, if he doesn't do his best, we'll punish him for his crimes. How about that? Zhu Qizhen laughed heartily, delighted at the good excuse he'd found. Princess Shangda's expression also softened. Gugu. Imperial brother still loves me dearly. Then let's have him do this. I'd like to see just how he'll make this princess happy. A beautiful smile appeared on her face that was still too young and tender. Princess Shangda was the third princess. She was still very pretty. After all, how could someone who'd managed to become the imperial concubine be lacking in looks? Her children would naturally be handsome and beautiful. However, her temper wasn't too good. She was a bit too domineering. The information about the third princess was quickly sent to the study of the Yang manor and placed on Yang Chendong's desk. This was news sent by Mao Mu. With a large amount of money and his status as a eunuch, Mao Mu already had his own influence in the palace. As for the emperor's sudden appearance in the third princess palace, it naturally didn't escape his eyes. You're going to punish the young master for his crimes? Yang Chendong couldn't help but laugh when he saw the detailed records, including every word Zhu Qizhen had said. Truly, accompanying the monarch was like accompanying a tiger. He'd contributed a high-yield crop like potatoes in exchange for a minor fifth-rank official position. Yang Chendong didn't say anything in response. He'd never intended to stand in the Great Ming Dynasty's imperial court in the first place. But not only did you not give me a reward, you actually coveted everything I've obtained and wanted to scheme against me. That's a bit too much. Yang Chendong's face showed a trace of anger, which made him very uncomfortable. Presumably, no one would feel good being stared at by the emperor. Fortunately, Yang Chendong was not an ordinary person, and he knew what it meant by impatience in small matters would spoil great plans. Fine, since you've already made your move, I'll naturally receive it. Someone bring Lady Shui here. Yang Chendong ordered outside the study, and began to plan the birthday party in his mind. He received the news at lunchtime. In the afternoon, a eunuch came to deliver the imperial edict. After explaining the emperor's intention, an imperial edict was delivered to Yang Chendong's hands. After that, the eunuch who delivered the edict leaned over to Yang Chendong, who was kneeling on the ground, and whispered in his ear. Eunuch Wang said that official Yang doesn't need to be too difficult, as long as the situation is good enough. As for His Majesty, Duke Wang will put in a good word for him. Thank you, Eunuch Wang. Yang Chendong agreed with a smile. Then he winked at Tiger's Mane, who was standing beside him. Immediately, 100 taels of silver were delivered to the eunuch's hands. The eunuch's eyes narrowed into slits as he smiled. As long as there were eunuchs in the palace, there was no one who did not know Yang Chendong. The diapers they were using now were supplied by him, which solved a big problem for them for many years, so they could be calm in any situation. In addition, the business of immortal abode in outer sky was booming. The eunuchs were full of curiosity and affection for Yang Shi. Not to mention other things, money was always the favorite thing of these people. In their eyes, it was impossible for them to have any descendants. What would they do when they were old? If they wanted others to serve them willingly, they needed money, the more the better. In their eyes, Yang Chendong was the biggest money tree, so no eunuch would be lazy if they had the chance to come in contact with him. Just like this time, who knew how many eunuchs were scrambling to do this task? And this person in front of him got what he wanted. He only had to make a trip, and he received 100 taels of silver. How could he not be happy? The eunuch left happily. As he watched their silhouettes disappear, Hu Mang, who was at the side, came up to him. There was a hint of anger on his face as he said, "Young master, isn't it too much to give them 100 taels just like that? They are just doing their job." "Hey, do you think the young master is still lacking money?" Yang Chendong shook his head unconcernedly. In his eyes, money was perhaps the most worthless thing. If he could use this to buy people's hearts, he didn't mind spending tens of thousands of gold. Only 100 taels of silver could earn him a reputation for being generous. In his eyes, this was completely worth it. Tiger's Mane, remember, don't underestimate anyone. Because as long as a person is used well, No matter how inconspicuous they usually are, they can play an extremely important role at a crucial time. Also, it's just spending a bit of money to make people work for us. No matter how you look at it, we're profiting. Using this matter, Yang Chendong taught his most trusted subordinate. Okay, in a while, you'll receive another 100,000 taels of silver. The intelligence system of the capital needs to be strengthened. I want to know what every important official is doing every day. I also want to know the power distribution of the eunuchs in the palace. I even want to know which concubine Zhu Qizhen favors, and where he stayed last night. I want to know everything, understand? Yes. Tiger's mane stood at attention, and then turned to leave. He was well aware that the young master was advising him, as well as hammering him. It seemed like the development of the capital's Bureau of Security was still a little too slow. But it didn't matter. As long as there was enough money, there was nothing that couldn't be done, and there was no information that couldn't be gathered. The third princess was going to celebrate her birthday, and Yang Chendong was in charge of planning it. This matter spread like the wind through the imperial palace, through the imperial court, and even into the manners of the various officials. The reason even the families of the officials knew about it was because the emperor had invited all the daughters of the officials to the imperial palace on the same day and celebrate together. If one were to ask which young master or young master had the most influence in the hearts of the young ladies, if Yang Chendong was ranked second, no one would dare to be first. Even the current emperor, Zhu Qizhen, was slightly inferior. Zhu Qizhen already had Empress Qian and 2 official consorts in the harem. As for the other concubines, they were too numerous to count. Marrying the emperor was indeed glorious, but there were too many challenges to face. There were so many that these girls were worried that they would be eaten alive and spat out after entering the palace. In contrast, Yang Chendong was completely different. He didn't have a wife. Even if he had an official concubine, it was said that he only had Xiao Yin, the maid who warmed his bed, and Lady Shui, who threw herself into his arms. Even Lady Xiang, who was always by his side, was still a virgin. If they could marry Yang Chendong, given their background, they would naturally have a respected status, and that would mean that they would have endless money to spend. Moreover, this person was only 19 years old, and he was already a 5th-rank official. His future could be described as limitless. Not to mention that Yang Chendong was originally handsome and confident. Which girl wouldn't like him? When they heard that it was Dong Shui who planned the birthday banquet, the girls' minds became active. They all went to their parents and begged to be allowed to enter the palace on that day. Regarding this, the officials had their own opinions. To be able to become an official of the court, which one of them wasn't experienced? Which one of them hadn't experienced 81 difficulties to achieve success? Which one of them didn't spend their days trying to figure out the emperor's intentions and observing the situation of the court? Because of this, the officials could see that this wasn't a good job to begin with. It was very likely that the emperor had set a trap for Yang Chendong in order to find an opportunity to deal with him. As for what they could obtain after dealing with him, this wasn't something that the officials dared to guess. Since it was a trap, the officials naturally wouldn't allow their daughters' requests. This muddy water wasn't easy to wade in. The officials' reactions were almost the same. Naturally, this kind of matter would be noticed by the East faction guards. Someone immediately reported this matter to Zhu Qizhen. What? The officials don't agree? Humph. It's Zhen's younger sister's birthday. How would they dare to disobey? Could it be that they are distressed over the small amount of gift money? Men issue an edict. Tell all the officials in Zhen's name that all of their daughters must enter the palace on that day to celebrate Princess Shangda's birthday. Those who don't comply will be punished for defying the edict. Zhu Qizhen said with a face full of anger. Since he wanted to deal with Yang Chendong, it was naturally better to make it as big as possible. Taking the initiative to invite the daughters of the officials. How could Zhu Qizhen let go of such an opportunity to blow things up? He naturally had to carry it out. Not only that, he also imagined that when things went wrong, he would stand out and clean up the mess with the imperial family's reputation. In this way, even if the other officials pleaded for leniency, he would only ask for a fine of silver, and not a change in his official position. The others wouldn't be able to say anything. Zhu Qizhen's edict reached the various residences. For a moment, everyone was in a state of chaos. It seemed that they wouldn't have the chance to avoid this muddy water, even if they wanted to. Tell Yang Qindong to be careful. The Minister of Works, Sherpu, said to his butler. This isn't an easy job. Tell him to be careful. The Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua, pondered in his study. In the end, he still decided to remind Yang Qindong. Young people should still be cautious. How about this, Changning? You will personally make a trip. The Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao, sighed in his study. This meant that he had already approved of the marriage between Yang Qindong and his granddaughter, Hu Yan. The Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji, was even more direct. His grandson, Wang Si, directly left the capital and went to the Yang family manor. The 4 ministers, as well as the assistant ministers and officials below the 3rd rank, had sent people to remind Yang Qindong in various ways. They had also more or less received benefits from Yang Qindong in various aspects. If they were officials who had some friendship with Yang Qindong in the past, they would not be able to do anything. Chapter 117. This was the so-called aristocratic group. When something happened, it was natural for them to band together. Regardless of whether it was to help each other, or because they were intimately interdependent, at least 1/3 of the officials in the capital participated in this matter, and issued a kind warning to Yang Qindong. This time, even Wang Zhen sent a eunuch to warn him. He even personally sent Mao Mu, the eunuch of the ceremony supervisor, to the Yang family manor. Dong Shuai, Eunuch Wang said that this time, the emperor is really angry and will definitely teach you a lesson. No matter how good the 3rd princess birthday banquet is, he will still express his dissatisfaction. Mao Mu looked carefully at Yang Qindong. Because of Yang Qindong, Mao Mu was no longer the eunuch who was looked down upon by others. He had his own power and had a group of followers and a certain amount of power in the entire palace. Humans were like this. Before they had power, they might be able to live a peaceful life. But once they had power, they would only seek greater things and be more afraid of losing them. Mao Mu knew very well in his heart that he could be where he was today, because of who gave him everything. He also knew that everything he had now was completely within the power of this person to take back. Because of this, his respect for Yang Qindong came from the bottom of his heart. It was the loyalty of a servant to his master. Knowing that his situation had long been tied to Dong Shuai's, Mao Mu spoke with a bit of caution and anxiety. When he spoke, he naturally considered it from Dong Shuai's point of view. Yang Qindong could sense Mao Mu's worry and anxiety, which made him feel very gratified. At the same time, he stepped forward and patted Mao Mu's shoulder. This young master knows all that you have said. But since it has already happened, what we need to think about now is how to change the situation and not escape from it. Do you understand? How about this? I'll help you with something. Yang Qindong smiled. At this moment, he was as confident as a general who commanded thousands of troops before a great war. As the 3rd princess' birthday approached, the atmosphere in the entire imperial palace seemed to have become much more tense. However, unlike the others, Princess Changda, who was the protagonist, did not feel it at all. Instead, her face was filled with anticipation, looking forward to what kind of surprise Dong Shuai would bring her. 3rd princess, a eunuch called Mao Mu is looking for you. He said that the East Marshal has something important to discuss with you. You see. Her personal maid walked to Princess Shangda's side and whispered into her ear. Dong Shuai is looking for me? Princess Changda's face was filled with astonishment. She could not understand why this Yang Qindong was looking for her when her birthday had not yet arrived. Yes, this eunuch Mao also said that if the princess doesn't agree to see him, she will definitely regret it. When the maidservant thought of the 100 taels of silver she had just received, she tried her best to put in a good word for Mao Mu. To be honest, it was just a eunuch who wanted to see the princess. She actually gave him 100 taels of silver as a reward. This silver was too easy to earn. The innocent 3rd princess nodded curiously. Arrange for him to come in. But remember, don't let anyone else see him. Having been in the imperial palace since young, she naturally knew that it was difficult to keep any secrets here. Although eunuchs were everywhere in the imperial harem, this eunuch Mao was someone sent by the East Marshal. Naturally, he was different from others. Once he was discovered, who knew what kind of waves it would cause? Yes, princess. Don't worry, I will definitely not let anyone else see you. Afraid that her 100 taels of silver would fly away, the maidservant said with a resolute face. What would come in the end. Under the attention of many people, the third princess' birthday finally arrived. On this day, the imperial palace seemed to be much livelier. With the intention of making a big deal out of this matter, Zhu Qizhen deliberately made the entire imperial palace know about this matter. He also specially issued an edict that the eunuchs and maidservants of each palace, as long as they were not on duty, could come to join in the fun and see the difference and uniqueness between the East Marshal and others. In the morning, after the court, the daughters of the ministers began to line up to enter the imperial palace. From afar, the number of people was at least 500. This was because maids were not allowed to enter the imperial palace. Otherwise, there would be more people. But even so, with such influence and scale, it was likely that no matter what happened, it would be clearly known to all the officials. Yang Duo and Hu Yan were also in the crowd, lining up to enter the imperial palace. By right, Yang Duo was already married and was not qualified to attend the third princess banquet. But because she was a member of the Yang family, she was specially approved. At this time, she was walking together with Hu Yan, but no matter how one looked at it, the two of them looked a little anxious. The environment could affect a person. They were both born in the families of important ministers, so their sensitivity to some things was naturally incomparable to that of ordinary people. They could clearly feel that this banquet would not be a good one, and the wine would not be good. But compared to the other people who were more interested in watching the show, they were more worried about Yang Qindong. Although the matter between Hu Yan and Yang Qindong was not made public, as the seventh sister, Yang Duo naturally knew about it. When she saw that Hu Yan, who had always been playful and cute, was trembling nervously at the moment, she couldn't help but gently tug at her arm and said with a smile, "What's wrong? You haven't married yet, but you're already worried about your future husband?" Hu Yan, who was originally very nervous, immediately blushed when Yang Duo said this. "Seventh sister, could it be that you're not worried about Dong Shuai? My grandfather said that this time, it is clearly the emperor who is looking for trouble with Dong Shuai." How could Yang Duo not know the importance of this matter? Even at home, her husband, Wang Go, who had been well-behaved for a while, recently jumped up again. Especially that evil mother-in-law, Yan Shi, who was full of sarcastic remarks. Looking at her attitude, it was as if her sixth brother had already been given the cold shoulder by the emperor. Although she said that she was worried, Yang Duo knew that this was not the time to panic. Otherwise, before the emperor did anything, Dong Shuai would have problems first. Don't worry, could it be that you don't have any confidence in Dong Shuai? I have confidence, but this time, it is the emperor. Hu Yan still wanted to continue explaining. It's good that you have confidence. Yang Duo directly interrupted. Since you have confidence, then let's see how your Dong Shuai will create a miracle. Originally, Hu Yan's face was full of worry, but after hearing Yang Duo's words, she calmed down a lot for no reason. Then her steps became much firmer. She was looking forward to Dong Shuai's wonderful performance in her heart. Compared to the nervousness of others, the main character, Yang Qindong, was very calm, at least on the surface. When the time came, he strode into the inner palace of the imperial city under the lead of a steward eunuch. This was also his first time here. His face was full of curiosity, looking left and right as if he was here for a vacation. This also caused the steward eunuch to be secretly amazed. Everyone said that Dong Shuai was very capable. Although he wasn't too clear, at least his ability to maintain his composure was incomparable to others. He still remembered the first time he entered the palace. His face was full of anxiety and nervousness. How could he dare to be as natural as Dong Shuai? Dong Shuai? The palace in front is where Princess Shangde rests. Today's birthday banquet will also be held there. Seeing that they were almost there, the steward eunuch reminded Yang Qindong in a small voice. Okay, thank you for your hard work. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, revealing a confident smile. Like magic, he took out a large piece of silver from his sleeve and casually handed it over. This was the biggest piece of silver. One piece was worth 20 taels. After the steward eunuch took it in his hand, he smiled like a flower and said, "Then I wish Dong Shui all the best." Good. Thank you for your auspicious words. Yang Chendong laughed heartily, then quickened his steps, as if he didn't know that there was a battlefield in front of him, and that there was some beautiful scenery waiting for him. Yang Chendong arrived, just an hour before the other daughters of the officials. This was also specially arranged by Zhu Qizhen. He didn't want to give Dong Shui too much time to react and watch him make a fool of himself. After rushing to Princess Shangda's palace, Yang Chendong saw the main character of today's banquet, the third princess. When the gorgeously dressed third princess saw Yang Chendong, her face revealed an unnoticeable smile. Then she went forward to greet him generously, giving others the feeling that it was the first time they had met. In fact, this was also the first time the two of them had officially met, but in private, they had been friends for a long time. Yang Chendong greets Princess Shangda. Long live the princess. After saying this, Yang Chendong was about to kneel on the ground. Instead, it was the third princess who stepped forward and said, "Yang Shima, you don't have to be so polite. You still have to work hard today." Yang Chendong, who didn't kneel, raised his head to look carefully at the third princess. He found that this girl was indeed very beautiful, and her skin was also very good. However, those eyes of hers seemed to be moving too quickly, giving people the feeling that she was too mischievous. Thinking that this was only a girl who had just turned 14 years old, and that playfulness was in her nature, Yang Chendong didn't want to dwell on this matter. Instead, he lowered his head and replied respectfully. In reply to the princess, "It's not hard for this official to work for His Majesty and the princess. Oh right, in a while this official will arrange for some people and things to be brought into the palace. I hope the princess can make things convenient." Of course. This princess has already made the arrangements. Yang Shima, please rest assured. The third princess smiled and nodded in agreement. Since everything was left to Yang Chendong to arrange, then of course the people and things he prepared would be brought into the palace. Otherwise, what kind of tricks could a man like him come up with? After a simple greeting, Yang Chendong walked around the palace accompanied by a few eunuchs. He needed to take care of the environment and find a good spot. At least he would know how to place the things and people he had arranged when they arrived. Chapter 118. The eunuchs who followed him were all doing their best. When they faced Yang Chendong, they all had a flattering look on their faces. They had all received 500 taels of silver from eunuch Mao Mu in advance. How could they not do their best now? With everyone's cooperation, Yang Chendong soon had a good idea of the arrangements for the various locations. In fact, he had already gotten the blueprint of the palace before. Now he just needed to walk around in the real world and confirm the final location. For hours later, the people and things arranged were all in place. More than 500 daughters of officials who came to watch the ceremony also came to the palace. They were scattered within the range of their activities, chatting in groups of 3 or 5. It seemed that everything was ready. Finally, a sharp shout came. "The Emperor and the Empress Dowager are here." Soon, the whole place became quiet. Zhu Qizhen, who was dressed in a dragon robe, walked to the courtyard of Princess Changda's palace, surrounded by Empress Qian and a group of concubines. They sat in the seats arranged by Yang Chendong. There were too many people. Ordinary palaces could not accommodate them. Fortunately, it was the end of April, the beginning of May. The daytime weather in the capital was still very pleasant. Since they were all arranged in the courtyard, no one had any objections. In the courtyard, everyone was in place. Yang Chendong, the organizer and planner, was also watching all this from a corner. When he saw that even the Emperor and Empress were present, he smiled and nodded slightly to Madame Shui, who was not far away. Madame Shui got Yang Chendong's hint and said loudly, "The birthday celebration of Princess Shangda officially begins. Please enjoy the first program, the opening dance Happy Birthday song." As soon as Madame Shui finished speaking, a group of 14 or 15 years old girls ran out from the corner of the palace. They all wore short skirts that exposed their knees. They were young and lively and ran out separately. The sudden appearance of so many people caused everyone present to be shocked at first, but when they saw these beautiful girls, whose average age was only between 13 and 16 years old, go straight to the third princess's side and surround her, after being surprised, they all revealed expressions of understanding. Needless to say, this must have been arranged by Dong Shui. Sure enough, it was different. This opening was completely different from the previous ones. The sudden appearance of dozens of beautiful girls also shocked Zhu Qizhen, who was just about to find fault with the situation. Originally, he wanted to express his dissatisfaction in the first program, and was prepared to give Yang Qindong a show of strength. But unexpectedly he was shocked by the exposed white thighs. In the entire scene there were only two real men. One was him, and the other was Dong Shui Yang Qindong. Naturally, Yang Qindong had already seen these leggings countless times, so he was already immune to them and used to them. Zhu Qizhen was different. Although he had many concubines in his harem, they were usually dignified and beautiful in consideration of their status. Who would dare to wear such clothes in front of him? Naturally, he was shocked by this sudden sight. He was so shocked that he completely forgot about finding fault with him. In contrast, Princess Changde, who was surrounded by the girls, was very happy. She only knew in advance that there would be such an opening dance that required her cooperation. When the time came, she only needed to follow these girls and walk around the field. But she never thought that it would be such a big scene, especially the clothes they were wearing. They were so beautiful that they could show off their beauty completely. It made her want to wear one of them. According to the previous agreement, after being surrounded by the beautiful girls, Princess Changde followed them from the stage to the field. Then the sound of guzheng and pipa sounded. After a prelude that no one had heard before, Madame Shui walked on the field in person. She bowed slightly to the third princess, and then sang a beautiful song. There is always a song on the road of growth. It's a happy birthday song. With our growth, it's a familiar song. Holding your hand, I want to sing a happy birthday song with you. Today is your birthday. I just want to tell you that today is your birthday. I wrote a song for you. You and I are in the song. I'm so happy. This birthday song of Lu Mingzhe was not famous even in the future, but it was suitable for today's occasion. Yang Qindong had searched in the big warehouse for a long time before he found this song. As soon as the song was played, it immediately excited the audience. It was a new song that no one had heard at all, and it was so relevant. No one could think of any reason to object. Even Zhu Qizhen had long wanted to make things difficult for Yang Qindong, but at this moment, he really couldn't find a better reason to do so. He could only look on with hope, and find a way to hold Yang Qindong accountable in the next step. From his investigation of Yang Qindong, he had come to the conclusion that although he was very good at composing songs, especially new ones, they were usually inspirational and emotional. However, it was clear that this kind of song was not suitable for the occasion of the princess' birthday. When the time came, Zhu Qizhen would be able to find a reason to punish Yang Qindong. The happy birthday song ended with the accompaniment of the girls. Following that, a different kind of music began to play. Zhu Qizhen's eyes lit up. As the heavy melody played, Princess Changde's expression changed from one of joy to one of seriousness. At some point, Mu Lily, the former procuress of the 100 Flowers Hall, and one of the stewards of the immortal abode, was standing beside the third princess. Mu Lily had already become a woman from a good family. Following the introduction of the melody, she suddenly opened her mouth and sang in a mezzo-soprano voice. Thinking of your back, I feel your tenacity. Touching your hands, I feel your hardships. Unknowingly, white hair has appeared on your temples. Silently, wrinkles have appeared at the corners of your eyes. My old father, the person I dote on the most. The song Old Father took the stage. When she sang about my old father, the person I dote on the most, Princess Changde also sang along with her, her expression full of deep emotion. She was using this song to tell everyone that she was reminiscing about her father, Ming Xuanzong Zhu Zhanji. Originally, This kind of song was more suitable for a man to sing. For example, Yang Chendong, who had been controlling everything from the shadows, was an extremely suitable person. However, after some consideration, he gave up on the idea of doing it himself. Firstly, if he openly appeared in a place filled with women other than the emperor, it would easily cause trouble. Secondly, no matter how good Ming Xuanzong Zhu Zhangji was, he wasn't his father. Why should he stand out and sing for someone else? If Yang Chendong didn't come out to sing, Princess Shangda definitely wouldn't be able to complete the song. If she forced herself to sing, it would only cause the meaning to change. Thus he chose Mu Lily. This former courtesan had experienced many things, and her voice carried a trace of vicissitudes. She was just the right person to sing the song. Thus, the scene in front of them was born. Mu Lily sang the lead, and Princess Shangda sang the keywords, completing the song. The reason why she had to sing Old Father was because in the past dynasties, the emperors usually ruled the world with benevolence and filial piety. Without a father, how could a child be born? Once this song was played, it was really just to fit the situation. At least, once this song was played, Zhu Qizhen, who had been finding fault with it, couldn't say anything. After the song Old Father ended, the melody changed again. Mu Lily left as quietly as she came, and left without attracting anyone's attention. Only Princess Shangda was left standing in the middle of the field, speaking to the crowd with a trace of sadness in her voice. 14 years ago, my mother gave birth to me on this day. Now that I've grown up, she's truly separated from me forever. As her daughter, I miss her dearly. Now I'll dedicate the song, Only Mother is Good in the World, to everyone. I also hope that my deceased mother can feel that her daughter misses her. These lines that Yang Chendong had composed quickly resonated with everyone, especially since most of the people present were women. There were even women like Empress Qian, who was going to be a mother in the future. Princess Shangda's words instantly aroused their endless thoughts about their mother. Only mother is good in the world. A child with a mother is like a treasure. Throw yourself into your mother's embrace, and you won't be able to enjoy happiness. Princess Shangda's voice carried a trace of longing and reminiscence, instantly stirring up the emotions of everyone present. Because the lyrics were simple and the melody easy to understand, many people present agreed on the third time. Even Empress Qian's tears flowed freely. When she heard this song, it wasn't difficult for her expression to change. She couldn't help but think of how well her mother had treated her when she was growing up in Haizhou, now Lianyungang Jiangsu. She immediately tugged at Emperor Zhu Qizhen with her slender hands. Your Majesty, Qinxia misses mother. All right, after a while, Zhen will arrange for someone to bring her to the capital to accompany you. Zhu Qizhen looked at this Empress Qian, who rarely asked for anything from him, and immediately agreed. The song Only Mother is Good in the World had stirred up everyone's emotions. Most of the daughters of the officials were thinking that when they returned home from the palace later, they would personally accompany their mothers. At the very least, they would have to thank their mothers for their hard work. Everyone's emotions were so affected that no one noticed that a beautiful, three-tiered pastry had been pushed to the center of the hall, right next to the birthday girl, Princess Changda. Everyone, please calm down. Since it's a birthday, how could there not be a birthday cake? Everyone, please take a look. This is the birthday cake that our immortal abode has just released. There's cream on top, and a soft pastry underneath. It's fragrant, sweet, and delicious. Everyone will be able to taste it in a moment. Before that, there's one more thing to do, and that is to light a candle and make a wish. Madame Shui's voice clearly rang out in the hall, entering everyone's ears. Chapter 119. Lighting candles to make a wish? What does that mean? A minister's daughter, who had a loose tongue, was puzzled. In fact, not only her, but many people were not very clear about this kind of new birthday ceremony. Madame Shui smiled. Before they came, the sixth young master had told her the story. Now she was full of confidence and said, "It is said that in the world of immortals, people there worship the goddess of the moon Chang-yi. Every year, they hold a birthday celebration for her. At the banquet, cakes made of flour and honey were placed on the cake with many lit candles. They compared the light from the candles to the moonlight to show their special worship for the goddess of the moon. Later, when the immortals celebrated their children's birthdays, they also liked to put cakes on the table with many small lit candles on the cake. They also added the part of blowing out the candles. They believed that the burning candles had some kind of mysterious power. When people on their birthdays made a wish in their hearts, they could blow out all the candles in one breath to fulfill their wish. In the story, Artemis was replaced by Chang'e, which was naturally Yang Chendong's intention. He wanted the most mainstream culture in the world to be Han culture in the future. Even when talking about immortals, it should be mainly Han immortals. This little story was a kind of beginning of change. After Madame Xue finished her story, everyone was curious. Hu Yan, who was in the crowd, whispered in Yang Duo's ear, "He must have made these things." "Of course. What do you think? You'll be happy when you marry him. He has a lot of ideas. I promise you that you won't have the same birthday every year," Yang Duo said jokingly. These days, under the care of her sixth brother, Yang Chendong, she became more lively and cheerful. In the Wang family, there were enough maids for her to order around, so she didn't have to listen to anyone's orders. Over time, she slowly regained her original temperament, and was able to chat and laugh with Hu Yan, who was familiar with her. "Oh, Sister Duo, what are you talking about? You're so annoying." Hu Yan blushed when she heard this. She looked shy, but only she knew how much she wanted to marry Yang Chendong. In the middle of the venue, the three-tiered cake was already filled with 14 edible candles of different colors. After they were lit one by one, Princess Shangde crossed her arms and closed her eyes to make a silent wish. On the side, Madame Snow and the 14 girls who had been prepared in advance sang softly together, "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you." Princess Shangde made her wish amidst the singing of "Happy Birthday." She opened her red lips and blew out the 14 candles with the help of Lady Xue and the other girls. Immediately, there was a round of enthusiastic applause. After making a wish and blowing out the candles, the next step was to cut the cake. A suitable knife had already been placed in Princess Changde's hands, and pieces of cake of the same size were sliced out. Princess Changde even gave the first 2 pieces to her imperial brother Zhu Qizhen and imperial sister-in-law Empress Qian. The other girls who had come to watch the ceremony were also given a small piece of cake, according to their parents' official positions. Because there were so many people to share, a few more large pieces of cake were brought in. Even so, everyone could only eat a small piece. Fortunately, everyone quickly learned from Madame Snow and Mu Lily that the immortal abode was already selling such delicious and beautiful cakes. This wasn't too disappointing. But at the same time, these women also made a decision. When they returned, they would immediately send someone to the immortal abode to buy a cake for them to try. So what if it wasn't her birthday? Who said they couldn't eat something so delicious? The birthday song ended, and the cake was divided up. Logically speaking, this birthday banquet was already perfect. At the very least, it was unprecedented. However, in Yang Chendong's eyes, this was far from enough. He knew very well why the emperor had ordered him to host this banquet. It was obviously to make trouble for him. Even though he'd used all sorts of methods and novel things to prevent the emperor from finding an excuse to make trouble for him. There was no such thing as a thief. But there was no such thing as guarding against thieves all day long. He still decided to pay a little to alleviate the pressure the emperor was putting on him. Now it's time to present the gifts. Below is a small token of my appreciation for Princess Changde's birthday. Please kindly accept it. As if by magic, a list of gifts appeared in Madame Snow's hands. When she saw that everyone's eyes were on her, including Emperor Zhu Qizhen's, she smiled sweetly and waved her hand. Her voice was as beautiful as an oriole's. To celebrate Princess Changde's birthday, Yang Chendong will send 10 mirrors, 50 boxes of transparent glasses, for in each box, 100 bottles of perfume, 500 sets of soap, 1,000 pieces of tissue paper. As the singing continued, many eunuchs from the palace carried the items on the list into the field. Soon, they were piled up like a small mountain. Emperor Zhu Qizhen, who was standing not far away, saw these things appear in front of him. His originally stern expression finally relaxed. These were all very popular items. Some of them were even sold in limited quantities. They were the kind that could not be bought even if one had money. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were worth hundreds of thousands of taels of silver. Obviously, this was Yang Chendong's attitude. Taking the opportunity of the princess's birthday, he took the initiative to give gifts and benefits to the royal family. In this way, the other officials could not say anything. With these items, whether he used them himself or used them to reward the officials, or even sold them for money, it was all up to him. With these gifts, Zhu Qizhen's mood became very good. He also decided not to do anything to Yang Chendong. To put it bluntly, he was the emperor. The world was his. The reason why he targeted Yang Chendong was that he envied him because he saw that he was in the limelight. Now that he had received benefits, of course such thoughts were not so serious. The gifts that were presented naturally surprised the womenfolk. All of them widened their eyes and looked at the birthday girl, Princess Changde, with envy and jealousy. But at this time, as the star of today's ceremony, Princess Changde's eyes were fixed on a small and beautiful box that was not much bigger than a palm. It was a box with a delicate doll on the top. When the switch was flipped, the doll on the box began to rotate and move its limbs, and a song similar to the birthday song slowly sounded. To put it bluntly, this was a very common birthday music box in the future. The market price was only a dozen yuan. However, at this moment, it was undoubtedly the rarest and most precious gift that had appeared here. As soon as the box appeared, especially the function of automatically playing music, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. All the womenfolk looked at the box with admiration and amazement. And there was a strong desire in their eyes. What's this? How can it be so delicate and beautiful? Some women in the crowd could not help but exclaim. Thinking that it was a gift from Dong Shui, they hurriedly asked Madame Shui, who was holding the gift list. Madame Shui was in the limelight today. Although she used to be a top courtesan, in the eyes of many people, she was still a lowly existence. Especially in the eyes of these women, she was easily labeled as a vixen, a seductress, or a whore. She might have some reputation in her own home, but when she stood next to the daughters of these officials and dignitaries, she would be hated by everyone. Even in her dreams, Madame Shui had never imagined that one day she would be surrounded by so many nobles. Not only did these women not hate her, they even fought to talk to her. There were even quite a few who expressed their admiration. In the end, this was all because of Dong Shui. At this moment, Madame Shui was even more determined to follow in Dong Shui's footsteps and never leave his side. Yang Shi calls this a birthday music box. It can automatically play beautiful music. It's perfect for Princess Changde's birthday, Madame Shui explained to the women with a smile. I wonder if the immortal abode sells such a good thing? After hearing that it was a birthday music box, the women were tempted and eager to know where they could buy such a good thing. Sorry, we don't have it. Under everyone's gaze, Madame Shui shook her head regretfully. As you said, this is a good thing. In fact, Yang Shima had specially sent people to bring it over from the sea. Just for this item, he had spent a total of 30,000 taels of silver. Moreover, this was a priceless item. Our great Ming dynasty only has one. Ah, it's so expensive. It's a little expensive, but compared to its effects, it's not that excessive. Aya, when will a man give me such a thing on my birthday? Then I'll be satisfied. That's. She's willing to give herself to him, isn't that right? This girl is in love. Haha. Suddenly, all kinds of voices came from the crowd. For a moment, some people even laughed and played together. In the crowd, Huyen happened to hear Madame Shui's words. A trace of disappointment flashed across her face. When she saw the birthday music box, she fell in love with it. She was wondering if she could get such a thing on her birthday. But when she heard that there was only one in the entire Great Ming dynasty, she knew that she was dreaming too much. Chapter 120. Compared to the other womenfolk's disappointment, Princess Changde was extremely happy. There was only one such good thing in the entire Great Ming dynasty. This showed the importance of this piece of music. Thus, She became even more curious about Yang Chendong, who gave her this gift. Why did he give her such an expensive gift? Was it only because she was a princess? But what if the other princesses also requested Yang Chendong to hold birthday banquets for them? What would he do? The birthday banquet ended with a small mountain of good things. Next, the womenfolk ate some other food and left the palace in 2s and 3s to return to their own residences. Huyen also took a carriage back to the Hu residence. As soon as she entered, the servant girl Xiaoqing greeted her with a mysterious expression. Miss, quickly go back to your room and take a look. The East Marshal has given you a big box. Big box. The East Marshal gave it to me. Hearing this, Huyen couldn't help but quicken her pace and trot back to her room. Then, she opened the box with curiosity and excitement. The first thing she saw was a birthday music box that was even bigger than the one Princess Shangda received. On top of the box was a merry-go-round. After the switch was turned, the beautiful melody of a birthday song immediately sounded. Huyen was so happy that she couldn't bear to put it down. Miss, what is this? It can actually make its own sound, and it's so exquisite. Xiaoqing's voice suddenly sounded behind her. Huyen was so frightened that she turned around and covered her mouth. She clearly remembered what Madame Shui had said about this being the only one in the entire Great Ming dynasty. Now there was an even better birthday music box in her hands. Didn't Yang Chendong commit the crime of deceiving the emperor? Xiaoqing, forget everything you saw just now. No matter who asks, you can't say that you've seen such a thing. Do you understand? Huyen said very seriously. Xiaoqing was confused. In all her life, this was the first time she had seen her miss speak to her so seriously. After instructing Xiaoqing not to talk nonsense, Huyen carried the beautiful music box to the bedside. She opened the quilt and dove in. By doing this, she could prevent the sound from spreading out, and she could enjoy the beautiful sound alone. Of course, the sweetness was still in her heart. Through this matter, she knew that Dong Shui had her in his heart, which was the happiest thing. While Huyen was thinking about Dong Shui, Yang Chendong had already left the imperial palace and returned to the Yang clan manor. As soon as they entered the manor's inner courtyard, Yang Chendong took off his 5th-rank official robes and said to Tiger's Mane, "Spread the news that I, young master, fell when I fell from my horse and needed to rest for a while." "Ah, young master, did you really fall somewhere?" Tiger's Mane was shocked when he heard the news. He looked closely at Yang Chendong. "You were with him the whole way. When did you see the young master fall off his horse? This is just a way to get some peace and quiet." Yang Chendong smiled bitterly and shook his head. But he also knew that it was because Tiger's Mane was too concerned about him that he lost his basic judgment. "Oh." Tiger's Mane smiled foolishly and scratched his head. He nodded and turned to go about his business. Not long after, many people in the capital knew that the 6th young master of the Yang clan fell, because he was riding too fast. This matter was passed to Wang Zhen through the brocade guard. He was surprised at first, then shook his head with a smile. He's avoiding trouble. This is also good. It's not a good thing to be too outstanding. It seems that we should let the emperor know. When Wang Zhen went to see Zhu Qizhen and told him about Yang Chendong falling off his horse, the young emperor quickly figured out the crux of the matter. He smiled and said, "It seems that we are too concerned about Yang Chendong. This kind of concern is too much for him to bear. Forget it. Since it's like this, arrange for an imperial physician to take a look. Tell him that we will allow him to rest for a period of time." After holding a birthday banquet and sending gifts, Yang Chendong finally got rid of Zhu Qizhen's concern and was able to take a breather. He wanted to rest well and do what he wanted to do, but the situation did not allow it. In the 14th year of Zhengtong, Yeshen, the leader of the Mongolian Wara tribe, sent his younger brother to the capital of the Great Ming dynasty as an envoy. On the surface, it was to pay tribute, but in reality it was to ask for something. When it came to the Wala, there was one person that could not be avoided. He was the leader of the Wala, Yeshen. In the 3rd year of Zhengtong, the escaped Atai Khan was captured and killed by Tuohuan. The Mongolian plateau was reunited in the hands of the Wala. At this point, Tuohuan laid the foundation for his son, Yeshen. After Tuohuan passed away, Yeshen succeeded the throne. After Yeshen succeeded the throne, He called himself the imperial tutor, King Huai. All the tribes of the Walla submitted to Yeshen. As Yeshen's power and influence grew, the Tatar chief's title of Great Khan became an empty title. He could no longer restrain Yeshen. The Wara would pay tribute to the Ming dynasty every year. Tua Buhua and Yeshen, the ruler and subject, both sent envoys to the Ming dynasty. At this time, it was clear that Yeshen did not need to listen to Tua Buhua's instructions. At this point, the relationship between the Tartars and the Walla was similar to the current relationship between North and South Korea. As Yeshen was a cunning Walla leader, he was not as honest as the other Mongols. Instead, he was as cunning as a rabbit. As time went on, the power of the Tartars became smaller and smaller. Not long later, he controlled the Tartars and conquered Yulanhar, unifying the three Mongol tribes. On the grasslands, the Walla slowly became the strongest. After unifying the Mongols, Vachi wanted to restore Dayuan and unify the country. As a result, he harassed the Ming dynasty and became a huge problem in the north. Wang Jin used power. Not only did he not strengthen the border, but he also accepted bribes from Vachi and smuggled goods with the Vachi nobles. For the sake of profits, Wang Jun asked his best friend, Guojing, to make large amounts of arrows and give them to Vachi. Vachi would return good horses to Wang Jun as a form of repayment. To get on the good side of Vachi, Wang Jun also treated the envoys well and rewarded them. Ever since Vachi established a tribute relationship with the Ming dynasty, he would send envoys to the Ming dynasty with good horses and other goods. The Ming dynasty government would reward the envoys accordingly. Under normal circumstances, the reward would slightly exceed the value of the tribute. At the same time, the envoys had to be rewarded as well. As a result, Vachi was very willing to pay tribute to the Ming dynasty in order to obtain the wealth of the Central Plains. According to the original rules, Vachi could not send more than 50 envoys to the Ming dynasty each year. Later on, Vachi's greed for the rewards from the Ming dynasty grew, and the number of envoys increased day by day. For example, this time, the periodical king had brought a group of 2,500 envoys. In order to receive more rewards, he had falsely reported that it was 3,000 people. As soon as he entered the capital, the name he heard the most from the Walla spies in the capital was Yang Chendong. In the capital, when Yang Chendong was mentioned, the immortal abode had to be mentioned. The periodical king brought Captain Tuj Er's group of 5 to this place, which was known as the most delicious and fun place in the capital. If one hadn't entered the immortal abode, they wouldn't have known that people could still live like this. The delicacies here were things they had never tasted before, the music they had never heard before, the drinks and desserts they had never seen before, and even the chess and cards they had never heard of before. He only wanted to come here to try the fresh food before leaving. Who would have thought that after entering this place in the afternoon, he would only leave reluctantly when it was time to close for the curfew? Even then, he still looked like he had not had enough of it. After half a day, when Tujer went to pay the bill, he found that they had spent a total of 120 taels of silver. They hadn't even had a chance to play, but they had already spent so much money. If they tried everything, they probably wouldn't even have enough silver in their pockets to pay the bill. When the group of 5 returned to the relay station, the periodical king still had a look of reminiscence on his face. Let's go there early tomorrow and find a good place to play for another day. This place is much better than our great steppe. General, the immortal abode isn't a good place, but it isn't a place we can afford to spend money on. We haven't even eaten anything today. 120 taels of silver is gone just like that. Tujer stood off to the side with a pained expression. What? It's that expensive? The periodical king's expression changed when he heard this. However, he immediately began to laugh loudly. I didn't expect the immortal abode to make so much money. Haha, then this general must meet this Yang Jima. General wants to meet that eastern commander. Tuj didn't understand what the periodical king meant. He wore an unfathomable smile on his face. Correct. This general wants to bring him business and give him a chance to make a lot of money. Ha ha ha. Tuj didn't quite understand the periodical king's intentions, but since the general had said so, He had no choice but to make the arrangements. There weren't many people in Walla who were smarter than the general. As the captain of the guards, he was quite confident in this. Just like that, the next morning, a group of uninvited guests arrived outside the Yang clan manor. The guests didn't come in a soft sedan like the great Ming dynasty's officials. Instead, they came on large horses. They were dressed in the attire of a different race, and the blades at their waists hung unabashedly at their sides. It was as if they would draw their blades at the slightest disagreement. The periodical king purposely brought a group of 20 guards with him to the Yang clan manor. Their formation was quite impressive, causing Yang Wu, who was on duty, to frown. However, when Yang Qindong was training them, he had trained them to be courageous. He didn't seem to be afraid in the slightest. Instead, he boldly stood in front of the group and shouted, "This place belongs to the Crown Prince's steward, Sir Yang. Halt!" The group naturally stopped. As the captain of the guards, Tuj, naturally went up to welcome them. With an arrogant expression, he shouted at Yang Wu, "Hurry up and inform your master that the periodical king of the Walla has arrived. Hurry up and come out to welcome him." Chapter 121. So the general has come to visit. Please wait for a moment and let my master know. Yang Wu cupped his fist and said politely. After that, he turned around and walked into the manor. However, the wooden door did not open and remained closed. "General, this." Seeing that Yang Lin did not have the intention to invite them in, Tuagor's face was filled with anger. "It's fine. We are new here, and this East Marshal has lived in the southern part of the Ming dynasty since he was young. It's normal that he doesn't know about us. As long as someone reports to him, he will meet us." The magazine king had a confident look on his face. Over the years, Walla had become stronger under the leadership of his brother, Yes Hen. Under his overflowing confidence, he looked down on the officials of the Ming dynasty more and more. They were a bunch of people who only knew how to talk. What kind of ability could they have? Moreover, the person he was going to face was only a fifth-rank official. He really did not care about him. Yang Wu came to the inner courtyard of the Yang manor and told the young master, Yang Qindong, about the magazine king's visit. Then he stood respectfully at the side and waited. "Walla's people?" Yang Qindong laughed. He knew about the changes in the Tumu castle from history. Naturally, he had to know about Walla. After knowing that it was the magazine king who came, he did not have the slightest intention of meeting him. They were about to become opponents. If he were to get close to him, it would be hard to avoid attention. This was not what he wanted. "Tiger's Mane, go and send them away. You should know what to do." Since becoming the head of the security bureau, Tiger's Mane had a clearer understanding of the outside world. He was very clear about what kind of power Walla had and what kind of people they were. He was also very clear about the attitude of the imperial court towards them. Now that Yang Qindong said this, he immediately understood and nodded. "Young master, don't worry. Leave everything to me." After making his promise to Yang Qindong, Tiger's Mane and Yang Wu walked out of the inner courtyard of the Yang residence, while arranging for someone to report to the head of the eunuchs, Wang Zhen. No matter what, the other party had appeared as an emissary. If they didn't handle it well, it would be a diplomatic matter between the two countries. The matter might escalate, so they had to report it to the higher-ups. The staff of the security bureau quickly left the Yangjia village through a small path and headed straight for the capital. Tiger's Mane and Yang Wu also walked to the outer gate and stood in front of the Walla emissary and his entourage. "Greetings, Envoy Walla." Tiger's Mane greeted politely as soon as he approached. As the second-in-command of Yang Qindong's organization, Tiger's Mane naturally had the aura of a superior as time passed. When he came from afar, he had never seen Yang Qindong. He thought that the person who came was the main character of the competition. He was about to return the greeting, but when he heard that the other party was just a servant, his eyes flashed with anger. No matter what, he was Walla's general and the younger brother of Chief Yes Hen. This time, he had already condescended to come to the Yangjia village. If Yang Qindong didn't come out and only sent a servant, how could he keep his face? After Tiger's Mane reported his identity, He didn't look at the other party's ugly expression and said directly, "Envoy Walla, my lord was injured a few days ago when he was riding a horse. He is now recuperating in bed. It is really inconvenient for him to meet you. Please understand." Injured? That's good. There are too many warriors on the grassland who get injured while riding a horse. I have good medicine to treat injuries. Let me see if the East Marshal's injury is better. How could the tournament king not see that this was just an excuse? He wanted to expose it on the spot. Finding a reason to refuse the other party instead of directly refusing to meet him was giving the other party face. However, the tournament king didn't know when to back down. Tiger's Mane's face changed slightly and said, "This is not good. You are the envoy of Walla. My lord is an important official in the court. It's better not to meet in private to avoid unnecessary trouble." Tiger's Mane repeatedly stopped him, but it angered the guard captain Tugger. In his eyes, the general coming to the Yongjia village was giving enough face. Yang Chendong didn't want face, so he couldn't blame him for speaking rudely. "Ha ha ha, it's really a joke. He is just an idle official. The crown prince of the Ming dynasty is still a baby. What's the use of washing horses? How can he become an important official? It's really funny to stick gold on his face like this." Tugger looked up to the sky and laughed, causing the guards following him to also laugh. Swoosh! A murderous aura rushed out with Yang Wu as the center, and rushed forward at a rapid speed. He clenched his fists and glared angrily, as if he was going to start a massacre at any time. "Stop!" Tiger's Mane was the first to feel the murderous aura. He quickly used a voice that only the two of them could hear to stop it. Someone dared to slander the young master. As a subordinate, of course he was furious. However, the person in front of him wasn't a nobody. He was the envoy of Walla. If they were all killed here, the consequences would be far beyond what they could bear. Moreover, the matter had already been reported to Wang Zhen. Presumably, there would be people coming to the Yongjia village soon. If they came and saw a ground full of corpses, they wouldn't be able to explain themselves even if they had 1,000 mouths. After stopping Yang Wu and telling him to stop, Hu Meng's expression darkened. Whether or not my lord is an important official of the court is not something a mere guard captain like you can judge. You don't have the qualifications to do so. Please pay attention to your words and actions. Don't provoke any displeasure because of a slip of the tongue. If there are any consequences because of this, I'm afraid you will have to bear it alone. However, I don't know if a small guard like you is able to bear it. He had just said that His Excellency was not an important official, and here he was being looked down upon as a guard. Tuagu immediately looked at Hu Meng with a face full of resentment. You look down on a guard like this, then you should be very capable, right? However, 1,000 words can't compare to a fight. I just don't know if you have the guts to do so. Tugger rolled up his sleeves, intentionally revealing his thick and strong arms. When he looked at Tiger's Mane, he was eager to fight. As the guard captain of the competition king, he was naturally a person with outstanding skills. This was also what he was most proud of. Now that he was showing his strongest side, Tugger was full of confidence. He was even prepared to beat Tiger's Mane up until he was looking for his teeth on the ground if he agreed. The Walla were a Mongolian people in the West. They grew up on horses, and fighting bravely was one of the ways they usually solved problems. The tall and sturdy Tugger intentionally revealed the muscles on his arms and looked at Tiger's Mane provocatively. However, he didn't know that this performance made him look like a clown in the eyes of others. Tiger's Mane and the first batch of Lung Feng were all taught by Yang Chendong. Unlike many other martial arts that were just for show, what he taught was more about killing people. In Yang Chendong's words, war has always been cruel. It won't take care of you just because you're on the side of justice. Similarly, it won't ignore your weakness because you're on the right side. In the end, a real war is about killing and being killed. How to protect yourself while killing is the most important thing. As for other things, they are just fleeting clouds. Under such guidance, Tiger's Mane and the others were taught killing moves. The goal of their training was to inflict the greatest damage to the opponent in the shortest amount of time, and suppress the opponent's strength and ability. Tugger was just like this. Although he was tall and sturdy, he mostly relied on strength to fight. He was particular about defeating 10 people with strength. If this kind of person was to fight against a brute, he would have a huge advantage. However, when facing the agile Lung Feng members who knew the structure of the human body and knew the weaknesses of the human body, he was too far behind. If they really fought, the opponent only needed to reveal a small flaw, and Tiger's mane would strike with lightning speed and kill the opponent directly. In this way, Tugger's arrogance was like a clown in Tiger's mane's eyes. Naturally, he would ignore him. Tiger's mane's disregard, in Tugger's eyes, he thought that the other party was afraid. He laughed maniacally like a general who had already won the battle. When he thought that his momentum had shocked Tiger's mane and the others, he gave a look to his subordinates and prepared to break into the Yang family manor. Just when Tugger thought that he had the situation under control and wanted to perform well in front of his master, the tournament king, he suddenly heard the sound of horse hooves. Then behind them, a group of about 50 Iron Cloak guards wearing flying suits approached from afar. The sudden appearance of the Ming dynasty's brocade guards forced Tugger, who was about to make a move, to stand still. He even intentionally glanced at General Wang beside him. "Don't be afraid. We didn't do anything wrong. Even if the Ming dynasty's emperor came, what can he do?" The tournament king said arrogantly. Just from this sentence, it could be seen that in Walla's bones, they clearly looked down on the Ming dynasty's army and even the Ming dynasty's ruler, Mingingzong Zhu Qizhen. Speaking of which, it wasn't that the Walla were arrogant. In fact, in this world, the strong were respected. Just like the Ming dynasty's Emperor Chengzu's 5 expeditions to the Mongols, the Walla at that time were very respectful to the Ming dynasty. However, in these years, the Ming dynasty had changed 3 emperors and no longer fought with the Walla. As time passed, they forgot how powerful the Ming dynasty was. This was a good example of the saying, "Weak countries have no diplomacy." Tiger's mane had already seen through Tugger's arrogance and their intention to make a move. In order to ensure the young master's absolute safety, he had already made a gesture when no one was paying attention. No one knew that not far away, Yang Qindong's personal guard, Dao Xiao, had been paying attention to all the movements here. Even the safety of the Type 95 in their hands was unlocked and a silencer was installed. They were only waiting for an order to quickly eliminate the Walla team that came to provoke the Yang family manor. Chapter 122. This was the huge difference between modern weaponry and cold weaponry. It was able to quietly finish off the opponent. Although there might be some trouble afterwards, as long as the scene was cleaned up, even if there were suspicions, there would be nothing they could do if they couldn't find any evidence. But before Tiger's man could give the order, the embroidered uniform guard had already arrived. This speed was enough to show just how important Yang Qindong was to Wang Zhen. As expected, there were no eternal friends, only eternal interests. After investing so much money into the immortal abode, if anyone wanted to harm the East Marshal, Wang Zhen's attitude would be the first thing they would have to deal with. The embroidered uniform guard had arrived, led by a Qianhu official who was also Wang Zhen's trusted aide, Tang Tong. The order that Tang Tong received was to bring the Tile emissaries back to the capital. She also strictly ordered the soldiers guarding the city gates to not allow them to leave the city as they pleased. They were also not allowed to appear in the Yangjia manor a second time and cause trouble. After receiving this order, Tang Tong rode over with his men. When he saw that the Walla emissaries were still pacing back and forth outside the gates of the Yang clan manor, he couldn't help but sigh in relief. Soon after, he rushed over with a look of disgust on his face. Tang Tong, who had more than double the number of people, immediately took control of the situation. First, he surrounded Tuj'er and the others. Then, with a stern face, he sternly said, "You came to my Ming dynasty with the status of a vassal state to pay tribute, so you should abide by the rules here. How can you leave the capital without asking for permission, and come to the residence of Lord Yang? Just what are you trying to do?" This Tang Tong actually had some tricks up his sleeve. At the very least, he knew how to gain the upper hand by a show of strength. According to the rules, emissaries could enjoy a certain amount of freedom when entering another country, but only within a certain range. If they wanted to go beyond this range, they had to report it. But because the envoys from Vala came every year, as time passed, no one really paid attention to this rule. But this didn't mean that it didn't exist. At the very least, Tang Tong's words were reasonable, and Tuj didn't know how to respond. He could only look at the magazine king to see his master's opinion. The periodical king saw that the embroidered uniform guards had arrived not long after he arrived. He knew that this Yang Chendong's power was not small. Since he wasn't prepared enough and had overstepped his boundaries, he wouldn't be able to gain anything by staying here. This general only saw that the scenery here was not bad and couldn't help but come here. Since the Ming dynasty has rules, then let's just go back. To everyone's surprise, the magazine king compromised. His attitude was extremely sincere, as if he had really come here casually. After saying this, he was the first to turn and return to the capital, Tuj and the other guards hurriedly following. Soon they disappeared from everyone's sight, which caught Tang Tong off guard. As one of Wang Zhen's confidants, he naturally knew his master's attitude towards Walla. In the past, every time he came to pay tribute, he would give his master a lot of gold and silver. But this time he didn't bring any gifts, either because he forgot or because of other reasons. This already made his master a little unhappy. This time, Tang Tong came here with the intention of making things difficult for the magazine king, and reminding him. But he didn't expect that the magazine king would leave so straightforwardly. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even have the slightest intention of confronting him, which made Tang Tong unable to find a place to say anything. Tang Tong was a little dissatisfied that the matter was resolved so easily. This should have been an opportunity to perform meritorious deeds, but now he missed it. He was unhappy, but he didn't say anything to Tiger's Mane. He only said that if anyone came to the Yang family manor to cause trouble in the future, he should send someone to inform him, and he would deal with it. Then he turned and left with the embroidered uniform guards. After Tiger's Mane saw Tang Tong and the others off, he returned to the manor and reported everything to Yang Chendong in detail. Yang Chendong listened to Tiger's Mane's report with a calm expression. After a while he nodded and said, "I understand. After this incident, the magazine king probably won't come to the Yang family manor to cause trouble. However, he won't give up so easily. Inform the immortal abode and sky beyond sky to be more careful. Tell Yangtze to be more alert. At the same time, send Dao Xiao's second squad over just in case. Young master, now that Dao Xiao's second squad has left, there's only Qiu V's first squad left. If anything happens, your safety." Tiger's Mane said with some worry. This young master's safety is naturally not an issue. If something really happens, don't I still have you guys? Besides, even if something really does happen, it's not like you don't know this young master's strength. If you want to touch me, who knows if there's anyone in the world who can do it? Yang Chendong's voice was filled with confidence. With his ability to enter the warehouse at any time, and even have a helicopter appear at any time, anyone who wanted to capture him would have to be willing. Otherwise, even an entire army wouldn't be able to do anything to him. But young master. Although Tiger's Mane was filled with confidence in Yang Chendong, he didn't want to see the young master take any risks. He asked carefully, "Young master, we've already completed our initial preparations in the capital. Much of the work has already begun, but we're still lacking manpower. Do you think it's possible to transfer some people over from Crimson City? This is also for the sake of better future development." Yang Chendong wasn't someone who couldn't listen to other people's opinions. On the contrary, he always believed that there was a limit to a person's wisdom. Only by gathering the wisdom of the masses could many things be done more perfectly. "Okay, we'll do as you say. Transfer a company of Cold Vanguard from Crimson City, as well as the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad." Yang Chendong naturally had his own considerations for transferring the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad over. Seeing that it wouldn't be long before the Tumu Castle incident happened, if they didn't have enough strength, they wouldn't be able to perform perfectly in many things. Hearing that he could transfer 100 Cold Vanguard and even the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad, Tiger's Mane's face lit up with joy. He let out a long sigh of relief and hurriedly agreed, turning around to make arrangements. Back to the competition king. Yongjia Village's fruitless return made him extremely annoyed. He originally thought that a small Ming Dynasty rank 5 official would feel honored and open the door to welcome him and treat him as a guest. Didn't people say that the Han people were a nation of etiquette? However, why did Yang Qindong not want to see him at all? Even after knowing that he had appeared, he immediately informed the genie guards. Why did he draw the line between them and be so careful? Was this his careful nature? Or did he feel something? The current Ming Dynasty and Walla's relationship wasn't bad, at least on the surface. As for deep down, although his brother Yeshen had the intention to swallow up the Ming Dynasty, and was even preparing in the dark, what kind of secret matter was that? Even in Walla, very few people knew about it. Could Yang Qindong see that something was wrong? He had a guilty conscience, and everyone he saw was a guilty conscience. This was the competition king's thoughts. It was precisely because the Vara clan was about to make a move that he didn't give Wang Zhen any gifts as usual when he came to the Ming Dynasty to pay tribute. Since they were about to become enemies, there was no point in giving anything. Even this time's tribute was to deceive the Ming Dynasty and prepare for the Walla's surprise attack. Currently, the Ming Dynasty seemed to know nothing about this. At the very least, there was no change in how they were received. Even the officials of the Ming Dynasty's Ministry of Rites were chatting and laughing as usual. This wasn't something that could be faked. Everything was normal. Only Yang Qindong's behavior was so unapproachable. The competition king couldn't help but think too much about it. How about this? Take some people to the Shinny residence and find out how this Eastern commander is going to deal with it. The competition king felt that he still needed to investigate Yang Qindong and see how he could deal with it. Since he couldn't go to the Yang family village, then he'd go to the immortal abode. Yes. Tuagor was feeling gloomy. Today's matter had made him lose face, but when he heard the general's orders, he was unable to contain his joy. He didn't have much ability to deal with things peacefully, but when it came to causing trouble, it couldn't be any easier. It was a good opportunity to vent his anger and let the Eastern commander know what the consequences of angering the Walla were. The immortal abode was bustling with people, and business was booming. Even the ordinary tables in the main hall were in short supply. If one wanted to eat here without a membership card or a reservation, they would often have to line up outside to experience the treatment and conditions. Sometimes, when business was booming, even lining up didn't mean anything. Often, when it was time to close, there were still many cases of people not being able to get in line. Even so, there were still many people who flocked to this place like a flock of ducks. They would rather line up, even if they didn't know whether or not they'd be able to get in line. This scene made the other restaurants and inns incredibly envious. However, their financial strength was far from enough. They did not have fresh songs and dances, nor did they have the unique taste of delicious delicacies. They also did not have transparent glass, unique private rooms, and well-trained service staff who were very skilled in dealing with people and had different styles. The hardware and software weren't on the same level. Even when the other restaurants saw how popular the immortal abode was, they couldn't think of anything else other than envy and jealousy. But today at noon, the exciting scene they'd been looking forward to for a long time had happened. Someone had actually come to the immortal abode to cause trouble because of a problem with a table. This made the other restaurants incredibly excited. Even if they couldn't obtain any benefits from seeing the immortal abode in trouble, it was still enough to comfort them. Chapter 123. Ever since the immortal abode opened for business, even the emperor and empress had personally attended. Numerous civil and military officials had also come to congratulate them. In addition, the embroidered uniform guard could appear at any time, reducing the chances of someone causing trouble to a minimum. Even if there were customers who were dissatisfied with not being able to sit at a table, they could only endure due to the reputation of the immortal abode. As time passed, the guests who came here got used to it. There were even some who used this as an excuse to take advantage of the situation. For example, when someone offended an enemy, owed money, or was on the wrong side of the road, the immortal abode would become their place of refuge. Often, as long as they stood in line, no matter how deep their hatred was, They wouldn't dare to make a move here. In this kind of environment, the employees of the immortal abode naturally developed a sense of security. For example, the two supervisors, Mu Lily and Chui Na, used to be the procuress of the 100 Flowers Hall and 9 Arts Workshop. They used to compete in secret. Now that they were both supervisors of the immortal abode, they began to compare themselves in secret. Fortunately, Dong Shuai was there to suppress them, so they didn't dare to go too far. On the contrary, they fought over each other, all for the sake of leaving a better impression in Dong Shuai's heart. Although the supervisors of the immortal abode had a lot of work to do, and they had to interact with a lot of customers every day, the good thing was that everyone gave them enough face. At the very least, they were in a cheerful mood. As a result, the two supervisors didn't have to act as if they were inferior to others. On the contrary, everyone's status was equal here. There were even some who would say good things in front of them and secretly give them money in order to get a position faster. The immortal abode had long since established a rule that no employee was allowed to accept tips. If they were caught doing so, they would be fired immediately, with no room for negotiation. Because of this, only 2 people had been caught since the opening of the immortal abode. Their faces were full of regret as they begged for mercy. Even if they knelt on the ground, it did not change their ending at all. This was also a great deterrent to the other staff members here. Even the 2 foremen did not dare to take a single silver coin for themselves. In fact, Yang Chendong had always treated everyone who worked for him well. For many people, being provided with food, clothing, and money was already a good thing that fell from the sky. There were also some people who were selfish and greedy beyond measure. It was no wonder that they were ruthlessly dealt with. Since they couldn't take tips, nice words poured in like a tide. As the foreman Mu Lily and Chui Na, felt as if they were bathing in the sun all day long. They were in a good mood. Mu Lily was on duty today. As the foreman, she did her best to arrange everything, until a waitress ran in front of her and said that there was a customer in the line outside who had an extremely bad attitude. He was so bad that the 2 waitresses in charge of the line were scolded to the point of crying. "There's such a thing? Bring me over to take a look." Mu Lily was astonished to hear that there were people causing trouble outside the immortal abode. In her eyes, what kind of place was this? Even the emperor and empress approved of it, and the officials of the imperial court would visit from time to time. There was actually someone who dared to say such filthy things here? Did they really eat a bear's heart or a leopard's gall? Mu Lily was a bit confused, and even a bit curious. She wanted to see just who had the guts to cause trouble outside the immortal abode. She walked over to the long line outside the entrance with the female attendant. As soon as she arrived, she saw a waitress walk up to her with a tear-stained face. "Sister Lily, it's that person. His words are so unpleasant to hear. We called a male waiter over to mediate, but he even knocked him to the ground." "What? He dares to hit people?" Mu Lily's expression was full of shock when she heard this. In her eyes, anyone who dared to cause trouble here already didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. What kind of confidence did he have to actually dare to injure people? Or was he really just a brute without any schemes? Wasn't he afraid of being captured by the embroidered uniform guard and imprisoned? With all kinds of confusion and doubt in her mind, she followed the 2 waitresses to the front of the long line, where she saw the brawny man, Tuj, spittle flying all over the place. Tuj had come here to cause trouble. After receiving General Wang's orders, he'd made his preparations and arrived at the immortal abode at noon the next day. His original plan had been to look for trouble after entering the immortal abode. He hadn't expected that he'd be forced to wait in line because he hadn't made an appointment in advance and didn't have a membership card on him. He was the captain of a dignified general's bodyguard. Even in the Walla, he was an existence that could do as he pleased. Very few people dared to not give him face. How could he not be angry when he was given the cold shoulder here? Add to that the fact that he'd come here to cause trouble in the first place, he immediately flew into a rage. He began to spout nonsense in the queue, cursing the immortal abode, and saying that they were bullying their customers. He even encouraged others to stop spending money here. Those who could afford to spend money in the immortal abode were either wealthy or respectable. What they wanted was face. Naturally, They wouldn't be swayed by Tuj's words. They only looked at him as if they were watching a show. Everyone had noticed that there were embroidered uniform guard members nearby. However, they didn't immediately stop this man in foreign clothing. It seemed like they were waiting for some kind of order. The embroidered uniform guard really did want to arrest him, but it was Tuj's attire that allowed them to recognize him as someone from the Walla. It was very likely that he was part of the diplomatic mission. When it came to diplomatic matters, the embroidered uniform guard didn't dare to act recklessly. They were truly the epitome of what it meant to be an expert in civil wars, but an amateur in foreign wars. By the time Mu Lily arrived, this was the scene that greeted her. Tuagur was stomping her feet and cursing something, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers. One of the Immortal Abode's attendants had been beaten up, and blood was flowing from his nose. He glared angrily at Tuagur, with the help of a waitress. "What are you doing? Do you know where you are? If you don't explain yourself today, I'll report you to the authorities and have you arrested." Mu Lily looked at the injured waiter from afar. Her eyes flashed with extreme anger. Ever since she'd been promoted to a member of the House of Good Children, she'd been able to speak with many people as equals. She no longer feared the authorities. On the contrary, when she encountered a problem, she would report it to the authorities. Suddenly, an extremely beautiful woman had appeared to criticize him. Even though she wasn't young anymore, she was still in her mid-20s. In Tuj's eyes, she was still extremely attractive. He only felt that the woman in front of him was 100 times prettier than the prostitute he'd found in the red light district last night. His male hormones had officially come online. "Yo, such a beautiful woman wants to work here to earn money? Why don't you follow this captain? I guarantee that you'll live a good life in the future. What do you think?" Tuj's eyes shone brightly. He was like a wolf who'd spotted a sheep. He approached her step by step. She'd interacted with all kinds of men over the years, so she was naturally no stranger to this kind of gaze. Mu Lily sensed a trace of threat, and her aura involuntarily dropped. She took a few steps back, pretending to be unyielding as she said, "What are you trying to do? Let me tell you, I'm a commoner from the Ming dynasty. I'm from a good family. You'd best have some self-respect." "Haha, a good family is good. A good family is clean. I like it." Tuj's brain was currently overtaken by lust. How could he care about such rules? All he wanted to do was to hug Mu Lily in his arms and dote on her. "What are you doing?" Someone in the crowd noticed that something wasn't right. A young man dressed like a scholar took advantage of his tall stature to block Tuj's path. He wanted to stop Tuj's unbearable behavior and reason with him. Tuj felt like he was only a few steps away from touching Mu Lily. However, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. In a fit of anger, he drew his sword without any explanation and slashed it forward. Holy shit! The scholar's eyesight wasn't bad. When he saw the blade coming, he hurriedly dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. However, a corner of his robe had been cut off by the blade. It fluttered in the air, as if to tell the crowd that Tuj's anger and killing intent had been truly unleashed. From drawing his sword to slashing it out, the crowd was scared witless. After seeing this person from the Walla's diplomatic mission get serious, no one dared to meddle in this matter. Instead, they all scattered, putting some distance between themselves and the Immortal Abode's main entrance. In this way, Mu Lily and the two attendants who followed her were completely exposed. Tuj's actions just now didn't seem to be inappropriate in the slightest. In the Walla, one's fists were the absolute law. Apart from the women of the leaders and generals, any other woman could be forcefully snatched away with their fists. Oftentimes, when something like this happened, people would call it a man's action. Not only would he not be punished, he would even be praised. Being captivated by Mu Lily, Tuj's current location was now the Walla's territory. The only thought in his mind was to steal this woman away. He didn't care about anything else at all. Someone come help. Seeing that there was no distance between her and Tuagu, Mu Lily lost her head out of fear and didn't forget to shout loudly. Her gaze also turned towards the embroidered uniform guards wearing flying fish robes not far away. Unfortunately, the embroidered uniform guard acted as if they didn't see what was happening. They'd already arranged for someone to report the incident to their superiors. They wouldn't act rashly until they received orders. Even if Tuj's actions were to kill someone on the street, as a member of the diplomatic mission, he didn't necessarily have to follow the Great Ming Dynasty's laws. Chapter 124. The brocade robe's indifference caused Mu Lily's expression to change again and again. Her originally rosy cheeks were now drained of color, and her complexion paled considerably. An ominous thought appeared in her mind. It seemed that she was definitely going to suffer a loss today. If she were to be taken away by this outsider on the streets, the consequences would be self-evident. If that were to happen, she might as well die. Mu Lily was someone who had seen the world. When she was young, she had once been a courtesan, who knew how many men had set their sights on her, but not a single one had succeeded. It was clear that she still had some tricks up her sleeve, and even her personality was firm and unyielding. And now, seeing that she couldn't even rely on the soldiers, she prepared to bite off her tongue and commit suicide in a fit of anger. Even if she were to die here, she couldn't let anyone take her away and ruin her innocence. Mu Lily's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness. She wanted to take her own life, but at this moment, Tuaguer's thick and solid right hand was already in front of her. Seeing that it was about to touch her snow-white skin, Mu Lily closed her eyes, waiting for the final moment to take her own life. However, what happened next didn't happen. Instead, she heard the muffled sound of a fist, followed by a cry of pain. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Yangtze pulling back his fist and Tuogi, falling to the ground. This move also caused Dao Xiao and his team members, who had been hiding in the shadows, to stop what they were doing. They had been arranged here precisely because Yang Chendong had sensed that something was about to happen. In order to complete his mission, Dao Xiao was prepared to open fire. However, he also knew that if he opened fire, things would become complicated. Just as he was hesitating and making up his mind to open fire, Yangtze was one step ahead of him. Yangtze was a trusted person. He was one of the Dong Shui's servants, and was in charge of the security of this place. Normally, he would enter the immortal abode and sky beyond heaven more often than the other servants, but his behavior was always extremely ordinary. Even when he was interacting with others, he was extremely polite. Over time, after everyone saw that he did not have the slightest arrogance, they started to get along with him. Occasionally, they would even make lewd jokes, which often made this young man, who had just turned 20, blush. He was just an ordinary servant. If he wasn't Dong Shui's subordinate, he wouldn't have received any attention. However, such an ordinary person was able to knock Tugger down to the ground with a single punch. This extremely contrasting scene caused Mu Lily's beautiful eyes to widen in shock. At the same time, her face was filled with disbelief. Tugger was knocked down to the ground with a single punch. Furthermore, he was beaten in front of a beauty. This made him feel that he had lost all his face. He snarled and climbed up again. Holding the scimitar in his right hand, he glared at Yangtze. "Brat, you dare to meddle in your grandpa's business? Go to hell." In the next instant, the scimitar flashed with white light as it cut through the air and arrived at Yangtze's chest. This strike was both fast and fierce. Many people with poor eyesight only saw the flash of white light. Because of their nervousness, many people clenched their fists tightly, displaying the nervousness and excitement in their hearts. There were even a few people who reached out with their right hand to press against their hearts, as if their hearts would jump out of their bodies if they didn't do so. Compared to these people, Mu Lily's reaction was even more extreme. She directly let out a cry of alarm. She was truly worried that Yangtze would die because of this. If that happened, even if she bit off her tongue and committed suicide, she still wouldn't be able to make up for her mistake. The scimitar slashed through the air in front of him, followed by a cry of alarm behind him. However, none of this prevented Yangtze from making an accurate judgment. Under his inhuman training, he had long since mastered the ability to maintain a steady state of mind. When the scimitar slashed over, he merely leaned his body slightly to the side and narrowly dodged the sharp edge of the scimitar. Following that, he rushed forward like an arrow. His right hand changed from a fist to a palm as he moved forward, grabbing Tugger's right hand that was holding the scimitar. Following that, before anyone could react, he clenched his fist, twisted his wrist, lifted his arm, and spun his hand around to raise Tugger's right arm high up in the air. Then he exerted some force. Accompanied by a crisp "Kacha" sound, Tugger's right arm was instantly dislocated, causing Tugger to cry out in pain once again. This series of actions was executed extremely beautifully. Regardless of whether it was the timing of the attack or the intensity of the attack, they were all extremely suitable. It gave people the feeling that the outcome of the battle was decided with just a single exchange of blows. Tugger, who looked taller and fiercer, cried out in pain as he hugged his arm. He was like a fat pig that had been slashed but didn't die. After doing all this, Yangtze confidently took 2 steps back and stood back at his original position. It was as if he hadn't made a move at all. Only when he saw Tugger crying out in pain and losing his ability to fight, did Yangtze slowly turn around and come to Mu Lily's side. He extended his right arm to support the trembling Mu Lily and gave her a smile. This smile was like the sun in the cold winter, illuminating Mu Lily's heart. She swore that she had seen many smiles in her life, but none of them were as sincere as the one in front of her eyes. It didn't give her the feeling that her heart was shaken. This smile caused Mu Lily's amorous heart to ripple. Her face turned crimson, and her eyes flashed with a blurred color like that of a drunk person. As if he had also felt the changes in Mu Lily's body, Yangtze's face turned red. While feeling his heartbeat suddenly accelerate, he hurriedly turned his head to the side and looked at the 2 female attendants who were also in a daze. He said, "Why aren't you sending Big Sister Mu back to her room to rest?" "Oh yes. After seeing Yangtze's performance just now, the 2 attendants' attitudes towards him underwent a qualitative change. When they heard his words, they didn't dare hesitate in the slightest. They agreed and pulled Mu Lily, whose body was burning hot, away from this place. Just as Mu Lily and the others entered the immortal abode, a group of embroidered uniform guards arrived not too far away. They had received orders to stop Tugger from causing trouble here. However, when they saw that the troublemaker had already been taught a lesson, they casually berated him a few times before walking up to Tugger and leaving. As he watched the embroidered uniform guards leave, Yangtze's intuition told him that this matter wouldn't end just like that. After all, he had dealt with Tugger on the streets. With the embroidered uniform guard's personality, he probably wouldn't let this matter rest so easily. It seemed like he could only immediately report this matter to the young master and let the Dong Shui make a decision. Tugger's arm was reattached by an experienced member of the embroidered uniform guard. Only then did the pain lessen significantly. Now that his body was no longer in so much pain, he returned to his previous arrogant self. He bluntly asked why the embroidered uniform guard hadn't taken down the person who had injured him. Just as Tugger was criticizing the embroidered uniform guard for their unfairness, the embroidered uniform guard appeared. Beside him was a eunuch dressed in eunuch robes. Moreover, from the way the others treated him, it was clear that this person's status wasn't low. His name was Qian Sungbao, and he was the supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. He could be considered a well-known figure among the eunuchs. Of the 24 eunuchs of the Ming dynasty, the Ceremony Directorate and the Imperial Horse Directorate were the most important. The Ceremony Directorate was the first of the 12 directorates, and it was often in conflict with the Prime Minister. Although the Imperial Horse Directorate was the last to be established, it was in charge of matters related to the Ministry of War, such as the Imperial Horse Directorate. Even Wang Zhen wasn't able to hide the truth from the eunuchs. There were many people below him who didn't completely listen to his orders. For example, the eunuchs Jin Ying and Gao Rang of the Ceremony Directorate often didn't listen to his orders. There was also this Qian Sungbao. Speaking of Qian Sungbao, he was also deeply trusted by Zhu Qizhen. He had once given an imperial edict to Wang Zhen's nephew, Wang Lin, to the embroidered uniform guard commander Qian Sungbao, and to the eunuchs Qian Sengbao's nephew, Qian Liang, Gao Rang's nephew, Gao Yu, Chao Jixiang's brother, Chao Zheng, and Kai Zhong's nephew Kai Ge. From this, it could be seen that Qian Sungbao was greatly favored by the emperor. After being favored by the emperor, He became the supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. His position was second only to the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Chen Guan. Because this matter involved an envoy, and because weapons were used, Qian Sungbao hurried over to deal with it. He just happened to meet the embroidered uniform guard at the door. Knowing that the embroidered uniform guard was a special envoy from the Walla, Qian Sungbao very courteously followed him to see Tugger. They just happened to hear him shouting, "Eunuch Qian, you've already heard the matter. My Walla envoy was beaten up by a commoner of the Ming dynasty. Shouldn't you give us an explanation?" The embroidered uniform guard commander's face was filled with anger. This was the same as slapping his face. If he couldn't get an explanation, how could he still have the face to lead the envoy? Qian Sungbao originally wanted to say that he received news that Tugger attacked first, and because of this, he almost injured a commoner of the Ming dynasty. However, when he thought about how no lives were lost, and the one who was injured was Tugger, he felt that he had already earned some face. Since that was the case, it wasn't a big deal to hand over the person who beat him up and end this fight. After all, the Ming dynasty and the Walla still valued peace. Tang Qian who did it? Qian Sungbao saw the embroidered uniform guard's Tang Tong, and waved his hand to call him over. Tang Tong was in charge of monitoring the envoy. Previously, when the embroidered uniform guard commander went to Yangjia village, he was the one who showed up. This time, when Tugger was beaten up, he was still the one who came forward to investigate the matter. Qian Sengbao's status was higher than Tang Tong's. Since the other party asked, Tang Tong couldn't not answer. After thinking for a moment he replied, "I heard that it was done by one of Yang Shima's servants." "Yang Shima? Yang Chendong? That Dong Shuai?" Qian Sungbao chuckled, and an imperceptible coldness flashed through his eyes. Yang Chendong's name could be said to be well known in the capital, and he was even in the limelight. Not only was he very talented, he was also very rich. He had also received Zhu Qizhen's recognition, and had a good relationship with Wang Zhen, so everything he did seemed to go smoothly. Chapter 125. But at the same time, because he was too close to Wang Zhen, he attracted the displeasure of some other eunuchs. Qian Sungbao was one of them. Originally, because the emperor valued him, especially Princess Changda's birthday, it was completely arranged by Yang Chendong. It was the first time in the history of the Ming dynasty that a foreign minister was arranged for the princess' birthday. Some people who had ideas didn't dare to act rashly. In addition, he had a good relationship with Wang Zhen, so Qian Sungbao couldn't find a suitable reason to find trouble with Yang Chendong. Now this person's servant was actually involved in this matter. As a result, it was perfectly justifiable to arrest this servant. At that time, if this Yang Chendong was sensible, he would take out a large sum of money and give it to Qian Sungbao. If not, Qian Sungbao would destroy his prestige. No matter what, Walla's envoy was injured this time. We have to give him an explanation. Should Qian Hutang bring people to call the servant? Of course, we're just investigating the truth of the matter. We're not saying that he's guilty. Qian Sungbao had a sinister smile on his face, as if everything was for the public good. Asking Tang Tong to arrest Yang Chendong's servant was to destroy the relationship between Dong Shuai and Wang Zhen. Who didn't know that Tang Tong was eunuch Wang Zhen's subordinate? Qian Sungbao was wholeheartedly for the public, and he came out in front of Walla's envoy. He didn't have to worry that Tang Tong wouldn't do it. Otherwise, it would be openly disobeying the orders of his superior. Even if a lawsuit was brought to the emperor, Wang Zhen wouldn't be able to plead for his servant. Tang Tong wasn't stupid at all. On the contrary, he was very shrewd. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to become a Qianhu. How could he not see Qian Sengbao's intention? However, the situation was like this. He had no other choice but to do it. He thought that if he explained properly when he went to catch the servant, he would not destroy the relationship between eunuch Wang and Dong Shuai. After all, they were both beneficial if they cooperated, and harmful if they separated. Presumably, Dong Shuai should be very clear about this point. He would definitely not destroy the harmony between everyone because of a servant. All right, I'll go capture them right away. After receiving the order, Tang Tong led her subordinates towards the immortal abode. The immortal abode wasn't affected by what was happening outside. What happened outside the gate was just one of the topics that everyone talked about. Compared to most people's indifference, Mu Lily was extremely nervous. After a while, her heart slowly calmed down. Then she began to worry about Yangxi. Wounding Tile's messenger in the middle of the street was a serious crime. She didn't know how a mere servant like him could be so skilled. This time, he had caused such a big mess. He wondered if anything would happen to him. Although Dong Shuai was very capable, this was only a servant's accident. How much effort would he put in? If Yangxi was punished because of her, or even arrested by the brocade guard, what would she do? Just when Mu Lily was blaming herself, Madame Snow came to her room to rest. When she smiled, 2 shallow dimples appeared on her cheeks. With Dong Shuai's nourishment, she looked even more indescribably beautiful. Sister Mu, why did you call me here in such a hurry? What's the matter? Madame Shui was arranging the performances in the front hall. Suddenly, a waiter told her that Mu Lily was looking for her. She was very anxious. She put off all her work and came here because of the sisterly love between sisters. Seeing Xiao Yuxia, Mu Lily acted as if she had seen her savior. She stepped forward and grabbed Xiao Yuxia's wrist. Yuxia, you must help me this time. What's going on? Madame Shui knew that Mu Lily was a strong-willed person. Although she had panicked a lot in the past, she had never been like this. She seemed to be out of her wits. Madame Shui was also shocked by her change. Yuxia, you know that there was a fight outside the gate just now, right? Here's the thing. After Mu Lily told her the details, Xiao Yuxia's face changed. She became more nervous and worried. So this time, in order to save you, Yangxi injured the messenger of Walla, which got him into big trouble. Unless Dong Shuai is willing to help, I'm afraid that he is just a servant. He is destined to make sacrifices and even pay a price for this. Mu Lily was so anxious that she burst into tears. Wait, Sister Mu. Don't worry. Let me think about it. Xiao Yuxia had become the top courtesan of 100 Flowers Hall not only because of her sweet voice, but also because of her wisdom. Otherwise, she would have been able to become Dong Shuai's woman, while Madame Xiang had not been able to become Dong Shuai's woman. Xiao Yuxia forced herself to calm down. She thought about the seriousness of the matter first. If Yangxi was just a servant of Dong Shuai, it was indeed troublesome for him to do such a thing. If it were other masters, they would probably push him out and make him a sacrifice in order to calm down the situation. But Dong Shuai was not an ordinary person. He would not treat his servant like this. Xiao Yuxia comforted herself. Mu Lily seemed to be a little impatient. Yuxia, this time no matter what, you have to help me, begged Dong Shuai. As long as Yangxi is fine, I'm willing to do anything to atone for his crime. Mu Lily's eagerness made Xiao Yuxia feel that something was wrong. After thinking for a while, she widened her eyes and asked, Sister Mu, Yangxi just saved you once. You don't have to be so excited. But why do you seem to be ready to risk everything? Is it because? Yes, I just fell in love with him. The moment he saved me, his smile completely opened my heart. To tell you the truth, I fell in love with him at that time. Mu Lily was really daring. Faced with Madame Shui's test, she admitted it directly. This was a little beyond Xiao Yuxia's expectation. She had thought that Mu Lily just wanted to repay her kindness, but now it seemed that it was not so simple. It was very likely that if something happened to Yangxi, then this elder sister would not live alone. She knew her sister well. She knew that she was capable of doing such a thing. Thinking that Yangxi's life was closely related to Mu Lily's, Xiao Yuxia did not dare to neglect her. Okay, I'll go back to the Yang village and plead with Dong Shuai. Thank you, thank you. Mu Lily's face was full of gratitude. She knew that Madame Shui was willing to plead with Dong Shuai because of her. This was also why she was willing to confess her feelings for Yangxi without any reservations. Madame Shui left as soon as she said she would. She got into her carriage and left the immortal abode. About 15 minutes after she left, Tang Tong arrived, accompanied by 50 members of the embroidered uniform guard. Wang Zhen held important shares in the immortal abode, So Tang Tong didn't dare act recklessly. He didn't even put on his flying suit. Instead, he changed into casual clothes and went to find Mu Lily, the head of the immortal abode. Mu Lily was shocked by Tang Tong's sudden arrival. She had a premonition that something was going to happen, but in order to give Madame Shui enough time to plead, she pretended not to know anything. When she heard that Tang Tong was looking for Yang Si, she put on a serious face and said that she had seen him just now, and that she would send someone to look for him. Tang Tong didn't suspect anything and agreed with a smile. However, they waited for an hour until he was getting impatient. Mu Lily also knew that she couldn't hide it any longer. Only then did she say that Yang Si had most likely returned to the Yang clan manor. Let's go to the Yang clan manor. Tang Tong's face was full of displeasure. They'd been here for too long. Who knew if they'd be able to find Yang Si? He didn't want to cause trouble if he missed his job. Mu Lily's heart clenched as she watched Tang Tong and the others leave. She'd originally wanted to go back and take a look, but she was on duty today. If she left, it would be a dereliction of duty. It would only anger Dong Shui, and the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Since she couldn't go back with them, all she could do was pray that nothing happened to Yang Si. Xiao Yushua's pleas would be effective. The situation in the Yang clan manor was completely different from what Mu Lily had imagined. Yang Chendong had no intention of giving up on Yang Si. His personality didn't allow him to do so. Yang Si had rushed back as soon as he'd finished his preparations. As soon as he entered the manor, he saw Yang Chendong and gave him a detailed account of what had happened. Then he half knelt on the ground. His actions today were a little rash, but seeing that the embroidered uniform guards were only watching the show without making a move, he could not just stand by and watch Mu Lily be taken away. If that was the case, he was afraid that it would make the young master unhappy. Yang Chendong was writing something in his study. It was a new song and a new book. The area covered by Yang Bao was no longer limited to the capital. He had already reached Tianjinwei, and the next step was to prepare to enter the auxiliary capital, Nanjing. Although this might take some time, the necessary preparations had to be made. As he wrote, he listened to Yang Si's report. From the beginning to the end, there was not the slightest change. Even when he heard that Tuo Gear's arm had been dislocated, he still continued to write with vigor. Xiao Yin, who was grinding ink at the side, trembled. She was clearly afraid when she heard this. It's fine. Yang Chendong had no choice but to put down his brush. He gently placed his hand on the back of Xiao Yin's hand and gave her a comforting smile. Then he slowly turned his gaze to Yang Si, who was kneeling on the ground. You did the right thing. Get up. Thank you, young master. The words "did the right thing" made Yang Si feel as if he had been pardoned. He stood up, and Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who were standing to the side, hurriedly reached out to help him up. In the past few days, they had gotten along very well, as if they were blood brothers. Of course, they didn't want to see their brother make any mistakes. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.